remember to bring them.
And they give you like $1 off for
Everyone
that's so
is
cool.
like, it's like, I'm telling myself I'm saving.
Yeah. No. I feel like Lush products, they last a while. Like, for me anyway, I still got my like little rabbit and stuff. It's like, I just watch to use it. I'm like, yeah, it's so good.
I'm so keen for the Christmas ones. They always smell so good. The Halloween ones, like, are kind of weird. I don't know. I don't know. They just all smell like weird spices, and I'm like, it smells like something died under a tree. But this is not fresh pine. But all their Christmas ones are like marshmallow, and I'm like, so good.
That would be awesome. I just don't like the Christmas ones, but it's like just the plain Jane ones where it's like you said, pine and yeah, there's so much peppermint stuff. I'm like, why can't I do something different?
It's so overdone, and I hate the smell of it. It makes me feel sick. Like, just stop, guys.
I don't mind it. It just depends how much intense the scent is. Like, I can't stand it when it's just over the top. Like, maybe like the slightest, minty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's so over the top.
My brother had this like weird peppermint lip balm, and he was like, I don't know, 5 or something, and he put it on a car trip, and I get really motion sick.
Yeah.
So then our entire car smelled like the strongest peppermint ever for like hours. And I was like,
yeah.
it was so gross. Like ever since then, I'm like, nope, just can't do it. Sorry guys, it's just it's a no from me.
PTSD from the scent.
Literally. Brain broke. Brain.exe has stopped working. Goodness, why is my iPad recognize my face for Flinders?
I'm so sick of this. Like, I understand the security and everything, but that push notifications.
Oh, yes. Oh my goodness, that's so annoying.
And if I do like remind me after 7 days, like when the 7 days is up, it's just so annoying.
Give me 7 more days. I can't remember if I've submitted my Ferrari, so this could be interesting. Last one. To Ferrari.
See, I don't even remember the topic numbers, I just remember it as visual painting.
I know. It's just like the 2 subjects that we have quizzes for, because it's 2402 and 2420. I'm just like, and it's practically the same topic as well, because it's all kind of vague art history. It's like general knowledge stuff.
I'm
And it's
doing
like,
mine next Friday because I have our digital painting class on Thursdays. Like, we just went to
yeah.
and plus I want more time to study.
So I literally have not had a chance to do any reviews yet.
I've really like read sentences for my review, but they're just not enough to like use it. I gotta actually put an effort.
I had 0 attention to stuff like I was literally just like in the chat, just like antagonizing. Like dumb meme comments. Like.
And I actually did quite like, I think I just got, not bored, but I just got tired of class and just like, I stopped listening like towards the, I think last 3 lectures or something like that. I just can't get through it. So I would just have like the Sims like on the tablet and I'll play, or I'll be playing this shitty game on Crabscapes. And it's like such a crap game, but I don't know why I'm addicted to it.
That's the one with the butler and you have to like pick out the house. Yeah, I get ads for it all the time.
It's so misleading. So you're not supposed to, like, the game's just like a 3 block puzzle game. So you have to match 3 blocks.
Oh, it's literally one of those.
Yeah.
Oh my
But I
goodness.
don't know why I'm so addicted, because I don't really want to fix up the house, because I love the art. We've been playing it non-stop. And I'm obsessed with Austin the Butler, and I'm at level 370 and he still hasn't got a lead. And he's floating off this cat through the I'm like, come on.
I love how they always have just like attacking this love interest of people who invested in the game. Like they do it every single time and it gets me every single time. I'm like, why do I fall for this? I hate myself.
So I'm interested in this like Austin character. I'm like, you know what's gonna happen? He's living with his parents, living in his old mansion, So I'm like having my own narrative while playing the game. So
That's so funny. Oh my goodness. It's like career goals. Let's just make mobile games and everyone gets addicted to it.
I do
Invested
like
in
the
it.
art though, so like, I'll try find that. What have I done? What have I not done? Yeah, I really like the art. It's like, so the characters are 3D, but the layout is 2D. I've been looking at the studio's art. Pretty good at it. Yeah.
Hamish says my wheels look too wild.
Oh, it's just like the wheels.
I'm sorry, Hamish.
Yeah, I really like the yeah, so misleading. It's like this.
What? Oh my goodness.
I do like the art. Yeah. I was looking at some of the artists online. Like the art so good.
I haven't played this in ages, so we thought it.
I was like, and Sims Mobile, it's like,
I tried it and I just like hated it. I couldn't get around the weird token system.
oh yeah.
You know that like you go work at the cafe and it, like gives you these weird star tokens and I'm like, there's too many rules. I just want to build a house.
I really like this art.
That's actually really pretty.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it so much.
I don't have two spiders.
Yes, what part?
Just that.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Let me know if this mic is working.
It's the disembodied voice of the
Cool. So guess what we're doing?
Wheels.
Ferraris. Cool. So again, same thing as we normally do. Get this, and we'll just sort of check out what everyone's been doing. So yeah, let me know in the chat how you guys are doing with this. You know, how you're tracking, if anyone's sort of behind, if anyone is struggling with any sort of major questions that I can help you with today. If you got any sort of things that you sort of noticed throughout the process that are sort of tricky, that again, just you like a bit of sort of clarity on, just let us know and we'll go over that.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
That's looking good, Michael. Yeah, again, looks a lot more proportional, sort of doing it that way and looking at what you've got there. That's awesome. Cool. And that was the one from last week. Yeah, so again, the perspective is sort of still is like good on both, but again, proportions looking a lot better on that one for sure. And again, here's George's. Again, I feel like, yeah, rims are new. That's looking really cool. Nice.
You guys are doing it. It's improving heaps. Really cool to see. See what happens when you kind of do the construction of it. It makes it way easier.
Is that the same rim, just copy pasted, George? Or is it a different one? I think it works either way, but yeah. Looking really good. Yeah, and again, I like how you sort of blocked out the bit at the back.
George is staying quiet, so there's copy and paste.
Well, again,
Yeah.
we're no spring chickens, George. That's totally cool. I mean, I think it looks awesome, George. Again, I was just sort of wondering because I was like, well, if you have replicated it, that's actually probably quite a feat. So if you have been able to draw it exactly the same sort of twice by using the calculation, that's commendable. If not, again, I think it's looking fine. Yeah, that's all. Again, I'm just curious. I'm not trying to like be like, aha, gotcha. I'm just like, what do you, yeah, it's all good. Cool. Murray, yeah, that's looking great. Cool. And Denzel's, yeah, I mean, I think that's looking pretty good too. I feel like that back wheel feels a little bit warped. Just like that ellipse could be a little bit out that way, but I'm sure you sort of calculated it. I think it looks really good, and I'm pretty sure once you put the rims in and stuff like that, you won't really notice that. But again, I think you've done a good job of sort of rounding those out, even though that feels like, Denzel, that might have just been sort of by eye. I think you've done a really good job of that. So yeah, that's cool. Nice. All right, so that was there. Just keeping track of where I am. Cool, it's looking good. I don't know whether that is the same one or a different one. Just sort of loading again. Yeah, everything's super slow. Oh, I gotta remember to hotspot as well. Otherwise I'll probably lag out. We'll see. All right, so I'm gonna swap over. If I lag out for a sec, that's why. Cool. So yeah, I feel like this one is looking really good. It feels a little deep, true. Like again, just sort of the sort of depth of it from here to here. And I think again, that's probably just the true cube stuff happening there. So you know, and that is the danger of the depth, right? So dealing with that depth there, the depth is always hard to gauge. I don't think it's worth worrying about at this stage. I think you're doing a really, really awesome job. I think these ellipses are totally on point. You've got a massive number of ellipses, and they all seem like A, they're going to help you, and B, they're sort of very, very well placed. Also, I think it's worth noting for everyone, except back here, I feel like you could maybe round that out a little bit. Maybe this one might just be tucked in a little bit more, something like that. But yeah, I feel like you can see here, and we'll check this out once we sort of look at it in Photoshop, but the lines here are super small, right? But you can see that allows you to really sort of go in there and illustrate some of these super fine details. And trust me, when you come to rendering, it feels like that's probably 5 times too many ellipses. But when you come to the rendering, that is exactly what will make it super easy, because you can really see where the form is going to turn, right? So again, Tree may not actually sort of put all of these in there, right? Like you might not leave the lines in there, but where the lines are will tell them exactly, right, how to render that. And that really is what we're after. Same thing with the rims in there. Just getting these exact little shapes there, right, is super important. Because if you basically just like a dummy go in there and put the right values there, it'll look like $1 million, right? It'll look like you know what you're doing. When all you're doing is just following orders, right? It's just put the ellipses in there, make them the right value, and away you go, you know? So again, I think you've done a really good job of the wheels. I feel like we maybe need a bit more work on the exhaust manifold there. Again, I can see you sort of working it out. I think it's just a matter of, like the trees, really figuring out those interconnections there, right? So exactly what's happening and maybe fleshing them out. Again, drawing a pipe that's curved is quite a challenge, right? It seems like you sort of just, you just draw some lines, but again, if you understand and your drawing supports where the form actually goes, it means that when you put the half tone, the termination point for the shadow in there, it all kind of works and looks good. But again, I think this is turning out really well. It's just a matter of sort of keep going.
And I would just say, just on those notes, like there's still a few people. There's still so Tree, just I want you next week in this thread, and if you don't, I'm going to fail you, right? I want you next week in this thread to draw the cone of vision around your Ferrari, right? And
just to see where it is.
And we can then have a chat after that, okay?
Right.
But if you don't do it, Tree, I'm going to fail you. So, yeah. All right? And the same with a few other people. Like, as soon as you get distortion like this, like with the front wheels and stuff, like, see how distorted they are? You know, like, it's just, whacked. Like, just
you're going a bit quiet again,
wheel.
Simon. So
Sorry?
just maybe
What's that?
You were going a bit quiet just as you were raging.
As I was raging,
loses the impact.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Well, just as you were making your emphatic, passionate, didactic, sort of what would be your pedagogic points? Your mic was dipping, and that was losing some of the emphasis, which I think you can blame Brecken for officially. I think you pay him now, so you could probably get out the whip.
Is it working better or not?
It's fine now. Yeah, I think it's the same as it was last time. Maybe something in there kind of makes it go down or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I wasn't doing that. I was more like, if anyone's drawing, right, and you see the distortion between the front wheel and the other side wheel at the front,
Yeah,
it's so
the
distorted.
size differential.
Like, you're going from a big one to a small one, so you're like, my thing's fucked. Like, it's not right. Does that make sense? And if I go through and I look at the people that have like planned it out and doing it, you know, well, they don't have that, right? And then there's a few where you go through and you can see like you're getting lots of distortion. And guess what? I can see that I can see that you're not drawing it in the cone of vision just by where your like points are and stuff, you know? And you don't really have points and things like that. So you can see where it like all breaks down. It's like, just stick to the process and it will make it like way easier for you. So, because you'll just be scratching your head. You're like, why is this, like, why can't I get this ellipse working? Why can't I get like the proportion feeling right? And it'll be like, because you're drawing where the dragons live, you know, like outside of weird areas where it's like, it's just hard. And if you're doing illustration, if you're doing like an illustration or a splash screen art or whatever, that's cool because you can play with it. But that's not what we're doing here. Does that make sense to everyone? So get in your bloody ground plane, like just check it in the cone of vision. It literally takes you like 3 minutes to check and do that. So yeah. I'll message Tree because I know he's not in the class, so I'll tell him he's going to fail.
Yeah. No, I think it's like again, and I feel like we had a few issues like that yesterday with the cubes, where I feel like it's just worth reminding people, because you guys are still in sort of second year, so you still have third year. But yeah, I mean, we do mention this from time to time, but these are technical exercises and they don't really... you know, it's not really meant to be this thing where it's like, follow all these rules, you know, or you're kind of crap or whatever. But it's also not meant to be a creative exercise, right? And I feel like we've been upfront of that. And if we haven't been upfront with that, we probably should be more. But yeah, the idea is kind of, this isn't about creativity, and it's not about like how you actually go about drawing a Ferrari, right? It's like the Ferrari is there to kind of teach us all these things, right? And I think that, you know, it's basically meant to give us this sort of grounding in control of this technical drawing. Now, again, how much you use that in your work is totally up to you, right? And whether you do really well at this or not that great is probably not going to ultimately decide whether or not you become a professional artist or whether or not you're happy in life. You know what I mean? It's just a way to test your technical drawing skills, right? That's all, you know? And it's a way for us to have that conversation to say, hey, looks like you're still doing that thing where you're sort of guessing the depth, right? And what's the first thing we talk about, right? Like day one. And again, the reason it's day one is because and it's tricky because this is the challenge when you're teaching perspective, is the most important lessons are often the most boring, right? There's nothing special to this, but the concept of the true cube and guessing the depth, right, of dimension in perspective is the number one mistake that people normally make. And it's also one of the easiest ones to correct. And, you know, but it's still one of these things that often sort of comes up. So this does is it just tells us that, right? It's just a mirror to reflect your general attitude towards these things and to tell you these are the technical drawing things you're still not doing automatically, right? And that's all it does. So our job here is to kind of, again, hold that line and kind of show you where your technical drawing is. And, you know, after that's done, you can go draw all the cool stuff you want and think about the career you want and how that applies to, you know, what you actually want to do. But again, this class is just about sort of technical drawing, right? That's kind of what it really sort of focuses on, right? So again, just understand, like, that's sort of where we're coming at here. I'm not saying, like, you know, I don't think Simon's saying, maybe you are, but I would say it's not like, you know, you're a failure because you're not sort of, you know, getting this one thing right. It's just kind of like saying, you know, this pile of information is sort of, I guess it's like we're saying it's actually not that hard to learn and you can learn it. You just need to kind of follow these rules. And often the things that make us, like, often in my experience, the things that have made me suck over time or not be able to achieve the things that I wanted is often me having these little attitudes like, oh, I don't need to do that, you know? And if I had like one or two little attitudes, because maybe I heard, you know, a really sort of prominent artist that I liked say, you know, oh, I never do perspective that you know, I never really put a grid in or something, you know, and that just sticks in my head, right? Or, you know, you hear someone say like, oh yeah, you know, you've just got to sort of, you know, feel it or whatever. If you have some attitude that's kind of like, you know, stopping you from just naturally going, oh, I'll just measure the depth, right? And again, by measuring the depth, I'll be able to guess the depth later on if I practice measuring. You know, often I had those things where I just kind of have a little thing in my head that just sort of said like, yeah, don't do it that way. You don't need to do it that way. And, you know, I just would always be avoiding that thing. And, you know, 5 years later, I finally get around to fixing it. And I'm like, you know what? That was really easy to fix. It was just a matter of zigging instead of zagging, right? It didn't affect anything. And now all my drawing is better, right? I guess like that's what we're sort of saying here. So, you know, if you're doing some of those things, this just mirrors that and tells you, right? And then you've got that information, but it's not like, you know, it's not a representation of what you should be doing in your art, right? What you should be doing is, again, working on your personal art and figuring out, you know, what kind of style you want and how, you know, what looks cool and stuff like that. But again, this will help that to a certain degree. And this is just all about reflecting back where you stand in relation to understanding all those technical rules, right? And so that's why, again, I feel like we're often sort of harsh about it, right? It's because that's what this class is about. It's not the, well, it does become in like late third year, but it's not the sort of the personal art sort of part of CDW, right? It's not the creative sort of character design part. Anyway, yeah, I think that's looking cool. Nice. So this is Ella's one. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my feeling is if you render that up, that'll look all right. I'll have a bit of a better look. Not sure about this mirror. I guess, yeah, that looks like it's a different style to the one I was drawing. Yeah, it's all looking pretty good. I feel like I'm not convinced about not convinced. What did we talk about last time with the wheels? I'll have to check that again. I think they're fine, but I feel like, again, yeah, I think it could just be the placement of this or the placement of that. I'll have a look at it. It's looking pretty good. And again, I think most of those things would resolve themselves if you simply just sort of render it up. Yeah, well, like some things to think about, like, yeah, I'll do a draw over stuff, Ella. That's probably the easiest thing. But I just sort of noticed, like you see the ellipse. It's hard because this is probably blurry in the stream.
That's so good. We can see.
But like, the ellipse there, right? I feel like that is not drawn to the same vanishing point, if that makes sense. Like that one's kind of just hand drawn a little bit, and you'd be surprised how much all that nonsense makes a difference, right? So probably, again, you know, you could use the same elliptical guide, right? The same minor axis for that one. Just make sure that's there. And maybe I would say, certainly if I was to cheat, like George, what I would do is I'd make one screw, right? And just copy that around, right? I'm like, that's fully legit technical drawing. Yeah, so just things like that, you know. Yeah, and again, remember to carry those back. So I'll cover that when I come to do draw over stuff. But yeah, I think this is looking really good. I mean, just, you know, if I kind of sit back, I'm like, yeah, I'm very confident if you colored that up, regardless of all that stuff I said, that would look pretty cool. Yeah, awesome. All right. So yeah, Daniela. Okay, yeah. So Hamish is saying there's a demo from the How to Draw book by Scott Robertson on dividing a wheel into 5 spokes in Bootcamp General Chat Discord. which can sort of help. Yeah. If anyone's sort of struggling with that, there's kind of ways to divide circles up into multiple things. I think it's, yeah, famously, I swear I used to be able to Google that and it would come up straight away, but Google no longer gives me that. So yeah, probably the Scott Robertson book is a better solution. Cool. So here we've got Daniela. Nice. Again, I feel like proportion is still a little bit off, but things are a lot better just in terms of, I feel like the overall sort of perspective. I think the wheels are looking good. So it's just a matter of sort of, I feel like, again, you need to, and you can sort of measure out some of these things as well. Like I feel like that front little lip thing is a little bit sort of asymmetrical. And again, remember I was sort of saying before about how, if the resolution is high enough, you can draw all those ellipses in, right? Again, I feel like here is sort of a situation where, yeah, I feel like we could sort of separate the lip there, and that would allow you to draw it much better, right? So when you come to paint it, color it, we kind of need that space in there because you're going to put color in there. So that's part of what the drawing is doing. It's kind of saying like, here is the underside of this, right? Here's where it kind of wraps around, and that will give you that little point to be like, oh, now I can just be a lazy artist and just put a highlight there because I know where it's going to go, as opposed to trying to have to sort of like paint around and mess around with it. Cool. So yeah, I'll come back to the drawing there with some Drover stuff. Again, I feel like the ellipses here, I feel like maybe the ellipse is in the right, so it's the right type of ellipse, but it needs to be moved down a bit, I feel like. So they should sort of move along, they should move back in depth along the same minor axis. Cool. Oh, it's a shiny one. Nice. Cool. So this is Seska's, and yeah, I think that's looking cool. Again, I think it's a good example of how, like, when you color it up, it suddenly looks awesome. Because again, this one, I feel like there's a few things, like, the wheels seem a little bit sort of squished here. Yeah, like just like a little bit. But again, when you sort of color it up, it sort of looks okay. And yeah, I think it's all looking pretty good. So nothing I would sort of worry about too much. Again, I think it's probably just a matter of, we'll check it out when it comes to the drawing, but you're definitely fitting them in there pretty well, right? But again, my feeling is some of them are not quite as boxy as they should be. But we'll check that out. My feeling is if we run the minor axis, it's not going to line up 100%. But again, I think you've done a really, really good job at the rendering. I think the car is looking nice and shiny. You've done some good work there, sort of figuring out those sort of lines, getting that working. And I do think you should try putting the shadow under it, because that can really help to iron out some of the perspective sort of niggles if you've got some of those things in there, right? So put in that ground plane, right? Put in the shadow, and like make sure it's nice and soft at the edges, and all that sort of stuff. That will help a lot with this sort of realism. So yeah, even if you just sort of put it in quickly to begin with. Yeah, cool. I think that's looking good.
Yeah, it's really it's really improved a lot, and I think Cheska, like the other thing is just with the front, right? You've almost drawn it as though the body of the Ferrari is just all straight, just goes straight through. But if you look at the orthographics, it's got a curve to the nose cone. So basically, the body at the from the back to the middle section is like all in line, but then it tapers in at the front. So yours just doesn't quite look like it tapers in. So that's why you get that weird, it doesn't quite look right at the front. So it's just, you need to just Like you kind of did it in your sketch on the right hand side. Like you kind of did it there, but in your
That went in
final
a bit
drawing,
more.
that's not coming across. So you just need to measure
Yeah.
that bit out a little bit more. Yep. That'll make a big
Yeah,
difference.
but next time, we're not saying like start again, or at least I'm not.
Yeah.
But yeah, that definitely is it. I think there's I think you've done a really really good job with the engine, right? The engine is looking, like that's all sort of lining up. You've figured out where some of those things go. Again, we've got all these things. Those seem like that's sort of fitting there. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going well here. Keep in mind, again, on the reference, what you will find is that the body actually stops where, so this is one thing you might want to sort of look at changing. The body actually stops kind of at the engine because the rear wheel axle sort of just goes behind the engine and there's no red bit past the engine. So this red bit here is not there in the ref, if that makes sense. And I think that will help the proportion feel right, like it's sort of working. And keep in mind, again, you might find that there's like one or two little things behind here. You've got it here, right? But there's other stuff, like you see this stuff like back here on the engine, right underneath there. Like there's some tanks and things. You don't have to put it, even if it's this sort of quality of drawing here, where you just like it's some cylinders. That will actually help to make the back feel longer. And I think that will also affect the feeling of the proportion, if that makes sense. So yeah, but I think again, I feel like this is yeah, and I think it is, as Joe said, it is really worthwhile having some photo reference and those things, which I'm sure you might have done. Sort of, is it Seska or Cheska? Am I?
Cheska.
Cheska? Yeah, cool. Yeah, so, but I think you've done a really, really good job with the rendering. And again, I feel like that is something that sort of solves a lot of ills, right? So I feel like you've done the drawing solidly and that's giving you ability to render it. The proportions are a little bit off. But again, what you've done is rendered sort of pretty well a Ferrari that's like a little bit off, right? And I think, Simon, that again, like there is value. Like you get the drawing as good as you can, and then you do the rendering, and then you finish it. And what that kind of tells you is like why you needed to maybe get the proportions a little bit better. And that can sort of help you again when we come to do this sort of again with the plane and stuff like that. So again, we get another stab at this. I feel like you're doing a really good job there. But certainly there's some of those proportional things that could be closer to the reference. And again, we'll check the wheels out, stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's looking cool. Making stuff shiny always solves everything, hey? And, if you actually have a drawing underneath, it you can make it shiny and look good. Cool. So this is Luis's. Looks blurry, but looks pretty good. Besides being, now is that? So it's not, it's a big file. It's just like a bit sort of blurry in terms of the, I don't know what's going on there with the JPEGs or whatever. Maybe it's just sort of been blown up and you're moving on to the next stage. But yeah, I'll do some drawovers there. Again, I feel like most of this is kind of looking okay. Again, just check back here, right? We can kind of see that minor axis, right, is not quite, right? We're not quite lining up there, okay? And these 4 quadrants just don't seem symmetrical. This one's looking a bit better, but yeah, just watch those sort of things, right? The structure of the car and a lot of that stuff seems pretty good. I want a center line, but yeah, again, we can look at that later. Overall, it's looking pretty good. Yeah, cool. Yeah, no worries at all. Okay, so this is Brianna's. Cool. Tiny Ferrari in the Kona Vision. Nice. Cool. Well, it looks like again you're sort of figuring this stuff out. which is awesome. I think that's looking good. Cool. Yeah, I think definitely the proportions there look a lot better. I feel like these wheels are going to need to be higher, right? So just check the sort of height there, right? Like how high should that be relative to the rest of the car, right? So again, just like how big are those wheels? I think the width might be there, but I think you'll find again when we're viewing a square from that sort of angle, it's going to be a little bit higher. So that's where again last week I did a quick draw over to kind of find the center line, right? And then you can sort of use that to roughly sort of measure like what the height sort of should be, and that'll give you a much better idea for generally how big the wheel needs to be, if that makes sense. It can be very challenging to figure that out because again, the size you draw the cube / the square in perspective there doesn't really tell you instinctively how big the ellipse is going to be. So you can like you get a feel for it, but initially often you kind of draw the square sort of too big or too small, and you're like, oh, because that's kind of how big the wheel is. But then when you put the ellipse in there, visually it's much smaller. So yeah, important to sort of measure that out. I can see you're sort of measuring most of that out, but again, just double check the height of those wheels. Cool. All right. So I think we're nearing the end of where people have been handing stuff up. What was last week's? Last week's was the 13th. So I'm assuming some of these ones back here. Alicia, I'll refresh this and see who is at the top. Got these guys. All right, I'll check that out. So again, we'll just go over quickly and do just do some sort of rough sort of feedback like this, and then maybe we'll take a break, and then maybe I can do some feedback. Maybe you can do some feedback if you're going to be around, Simon.
Yep.
Grab a few that you feel are sort of you'd like to sort of talk about more. Cool. All right. So this is where we were. Cool. All right. So I think that's where, right. So that's Duncan giving you feedback. Cool. Cool. Again, I feel like overall proportions looking good here, Erin. These lines are pretty thick. So if those are the final lines, again, you're going to have something that's going to be a lot more sort of cartoony. So just sort of be aware of that. And also, again, just sort of look at, and again, this is one of those sort of stylistic sort of things, right? Just notice that here, when we're going to sort of put that ellipse in, there's not any space under there to kind of actually render the sort of the front, right? To sort of render, right? If you sort of look at the reference, right, we can sort of see that there is that kind of almost that sort of red ring around the darkness there. So yeah, a few things there, right? So yeah, and let us know, Erin, like are you going to use the thicker lines? Like what are you sort of imagining there? Again, the wheel sort of inner part. I would sort of, again, just sort of look at here, right? How you can kind of see, again, I'm not sure whether this is the grid, but yeah, this wheel is a little bit in from that wheel. So things still a little bit kind of, right, a little bit kind of wobbly there, right? But again, you're at where you're at. So let us know what sort of feedback you like there. That will probably sort of help the most. Cool. So just reading this. Don't have any. Yeah. I think those wheels are looking okay. I think from this side they're looking okay. I feel like maybe where we're sort of falling apart a little bit is just the distance gauge, right? So again, just finding the sort of center, right, and measuring again from like the front point over to the rear sort of point. So yeah, again, and I feel like Marissa, what you're saying there is sort of interesting, and that's worth sort of noting. So your normal process is basically to sort of get the drawing like okay, and then start painting, and then kind of you fix the drawing as you paint, right? That's a very sort of common technique that people use. And again, what I'd say is I'd say that if you're gonna do the drawing to begin with, right? Like I guess what one thing I'd say is like who's working that way that you're following, right? Like what process are you using and what outcome are you trying to achieve with the process? Are you after something that's much more stylized? Is someone getting those sort of results that you want to get with that sort of process? There's no right or wrong way to do it, but certainly the way you practice getting better at this sort of technical stuff is by drawing, right? So the painting won't really teach you how to do this drawing, if that makes sense, because these are drawing problems. So in your painting, this is that sort of classic advice, like most painting problems are drawing problems, right? I forget who sort of said that.
Yes.
Someone said that.
Yes. Painting is drawing, drawing is painting. And we've been over this many times before, everybody.
So, yeah, but the drawing is sort of typically considered sort of like where stuff goes, if that makes sense. So when people talk about the distinction between, oh, this is painting and this is drawing, the painting is kind of like a painting and a painting process is a shape-based picture making technique, more or less, right? When you're talking about painting, we're sort of not necessarily talking about where you're starting with a solid drawing. We're more talking about where you're doing sort of alla prima work, or you're working with a style where edge control is very much a part of it. A lot of that painting is like, how do you handle the edges? How do you show the form? The drawing is like, where does the form go, if that makes sense? So the drawing is like, what are the planes of the face? So if you go out of sort of, Ferrari land for a moment, right? Just because, again, that might sort of make it sort of easier to sort of understand. So if you think about sort of your sort of classic sort of Sargent sort of stuff, again, just because it sort of is a good example, the drawing aspects of this are like, what is the outline of the face? What is the anatomy of the nose? Where are the planes of the nose? Where are the planes of the eyes? Where are the eyebrows? Where are the lips? What are the planes of the lips, right? So that, you have like multiple planes that are separating there of the lips, and some of them are darker, some of them are lighter, right? You've got these planes under the lips. You have planes on the side of the face, etc. Now, the drawing that we talk about is often like, where are all those things, right? Where do all those things go? Like, where do the features go? Where does this chair in the background go, right? Where do these lines go? And that's kind of what we're trying to figure out with our Ferrari, is like, where do the wheels go? where do the rims start? Where is this plane of the rim? Where is this plane of the engine, right? You've got the exhaust manifold. And, the question is kind of, where are all the planes of the exhaust manifold? So that's the drawing, right? And the painting is kind of like where you basically just define the lighting based on that drawing. And the painting is the technique that you use to kind of show where those things are, if that makes sense. So drawing with line would just be like, well, you know how I show the difference between those things? I draw a friggin' line there, bro. Like, just draw a fat old line. Whereas painting is like, no, you need to separate those planes by modifying the values and showing us the edges by having them found or lost, right? And so regardless of what technique you want to use, right? So we were talking like in boot camp yesterday about, the classic sort of Craig Mullins sort of, thing we like to sort of bring up, right? And I think Simon was sort of pointing out that, Craig Mullins, if you look at his sort of process and stuff, he does kind of have that process that I guess you're sort of looking at and wanting, where you kind of do maybe a quick drawing. He doesn't even do that, but he kind of just paints it, right? He's the prototypical painter. He starts with shape, he builds form, right? And he's kind of just sort of making it up as he goes along, right? He's not drawing all these things out to begin with, right? He's not sort of refining it all sort of first and then just kind of painting by numbers. He's actually sort of building it as a painting. So he's like your painter's painter in the same way, right? Sargent is your sort of painter's painter. But the drawing that we're talking about is, again, how do those people perceive where things go? And that's why, again, some people's sketchy stuff is not as good as Craig Mullins and some people's is, right? It's that they know where the stuff goes. And that really is what we're talking about here when it comes to sort of the technical drawing. So the better you get at this, the more you can do like a quick drawing, right? And maybe then sort of make up some of those details with the paint. But if you get the drawing wrong to begin with, it's very difficult to fix it with the paint, if that makes sense. So you can do a rough drawing that is accurate but maybe lacks definition, and then you can start painting that and you can refine and build details as you go. But if you start with a drawing that's wrong, the question is like, why and how? Like, to me, I would say that seems like you're kind of pushing stuff uphill, right? Because you're imagining like your like painting skills are better than your drawing skills. And what I would bet, right, is that probably you're just sort of hiding in some of the vagueness that you can get with painting, right? Now, again, we were talking about this just before. The style that you use going forward is totally up to you, right? Most of my favorite artists are not like Craig Mullins. I don't think this makes you a better artist or is going to change, whether you make you happy or whatever, right? But again, all we're doing is trying to teach you the technical drawing stuff so you can improve that and so you know how to improve it in the future. And that's where, the drawing here comes into play. So what I'd sort of say is I'd say, Marissa, I feel like, again, what you're sort of struggling with is the mirror that this is placing up that says, you're not very technical with your drawing and you're able to get stuff maybe to be appealing with the paint, but again, that is what it is, but this is kind of showing you how to improve the technical drawing side of it, and that's what I'd sort of focus on. I wouldn't focus on like your style or your technique or what you want to do with your art. Just think about this again as an abstract exercise. It's going to teach you as much as it can about technical drawing and technical rendering, and then you can use that in your own style in the way that you want, if that makes sense. but trying to sort of say, well, like, oh, I just kind of like, you have your process for doing it. I'm like, I totally appreciate that. But this class isn't about that. Do you know what I mean? It's about trying to get better at technical drawing. So I'm less concerned with sort of, you know, whether you end up with sort of the shiny sort of painted result and all those kind of things. I think this is a huge improvement. But again, things that I'm seeing are you're kind of putting in some of it, right? But then we're still just not doing basic things here, like just making sure that these things also line up with those perspective lines, right? So there's a bunch of other things here that can just line up with perspective lines. Now, again, what I'd sort of say just to finish is like, from my experience, you're drawing those lines anyway, right? You're drawing all the lines there. Why don't you just put them in the right spot? It's the same effort. Do you know what I mean? It's the same effort to draw the line. It doesn't affect your style that much. It doesn't affect your process that much. It's just that when we draw the lines, we should put them in the right spot. How do we figure out how to put them in the right spot? Well, again, we try and improve our sort of technical drawing. And again, the idea is that will sort of help you to draw stuff and put stuff in the right spot in relation to perspective. You know, and that will relate to everything you're doing. So hopefully that makes sense. I know that's a long rambling answer to your thing, and I don't want to sort of diminish sort of what you're saying, but yeah, just understand like that's where I see what you're saying, and let me know if I'm understanding you correctly. And then what I'm trying to do is place the information and what we're talking about in this class in context with what you're actually kind of saying, right? So I'm saying, I get where you're coming from, but understand this class is meant to deal with the drawing sort of side of it and the technical sort of rendering side of it, right? And that's where its value is. So again, I would say you're totally free to sort of do it however you want. I'm not suggesting you need to kind of, you know, do it any particular way. But I would say, again, we can sort of do some drawover stuff, and I can kind of show you where some of those things are. But I will guarantee you that you won't be able to fix that in the paint. Do you know what I mean? You may be able to create something interesting, but you won't be able to fix that and learn the things that we're trying to learn in this class, which again are you know, whatever value you place on them. That's all I can sort of give you, right? Because again, the key is to just be like, well, where does the line go? Let's put it in the right spot. That's the easiest way to do it. The question is just how do we train ourselves to know where the line would go? Again, this is only relating to technical drawing. So again, let me know if that makes sense, or if that sort of helps clarify some of that stuff. Because again, I know people throw around the idea of drawing and painting a lot. Cool. Yep. So starting again, this looks a lot better. William, again, we'll check it out in the actual sort of paint over, draw over sort of section, but that's looking a lot more promising. Again, just and again, that's actually a really good way of doing it. Just sort of placing the shadow under there. Again, that probably takes you about 5 seconds with a lasso tool or whatever. But that actually gives you a really good idea of sort of where everything is placed proportionally. And yeah, that might be something people can sort of try if you're struggling to figure out in your line soup, like what's what. Cool. It's a new Ferrari. Cool. Yeah, well, I think that like the new one, I feel like is looking a lot better, sort of proportionally. There's the construction. Yeah, so again, I feel like that one is working a lot better. Yeah, cool. Again, I'll sort of do some draw over stuff and sort of look at that. But yeah, I feel like the proportion there is looking a lot better. Still, again, I feel like a lot of it is just a matter of sort of being a little bit sort of cleaner with some of these things, and probably just studying the boat and just kind of curved technical things in a little bit more detail. So this is Liam's. Again, I feel like this is from last week, but we might not have gone over it. This is Alicia's. So again, you're sort of starting a bit behind Alicia, which again is I'm sure there's reasons for all of that. So again, this is sort of looking cool. Again, I try and draw these things. Again, let me know sort of what session, what stage we're at here. But again, I think the idea is that you again get good at sort of judging these proportions and drawing them from your sort of own angle. Which of these, a lot of these seem like they're sort of from the sort of photo reference, which again is a good way to start understanding the proportion. But yeah, keep in mind, again, what we're trying to do is give you the skills to be able to sort of sketch something out and then sort of turn it into a finished rendering. Yeah, cool. So yeah, just keep going, you know, like see how far you can get. Again, you might want to take on the modified, simplified sort of version of this. But yeah, I think these are sort of looking cool. Again, you know, as we sort of say, right, you know, something sort of 3/4, something similar to that is probably going to serve you the best. But again, keep in mind, you know, like there's a lot of distortion in some of these photos, right? So they're not always going to be the best to kind of, you know, show you exactly what's kind of happening. Yeah, cool. But yeah, so I would just sort of pick an angle that sort of works for you and see if you can sort of sketch and get the proportions right yourself, and then keep moving with it. Cool. All right. Nice. So this is Sam's. Cool. So still working on it. What we sort of had last time. Again, I feel like some of this is working really nicely. I feel like you've done a great job of putting in that sort of the cockpit sort of it's almost like a little windscreen that's not a windscreen. Yeah, so I feel like there's some really good stuff happening here. Some of these, we'll check these ellipses and do a bit of a sort of draw over thing. But again, look, if you look at just the overall proportion, again, it does feel like sort of the you know, compared to the size of the body, the wheels are a little bit small. And again, the body is kind of also just a little bit sort of wide versus, you know, sort of long, if that makes sense. But yeah, we'll check that stuff out. So again, it's just sort of like if we look at sort of the width of the body versus sort of the length of the body, it feels like, again, it should either be a little bit sort of narrower, or it should be a little bit sort of longer. This one again is like I feel like the proportion lengthwise here is a little bit better. This one again is a little bit sort of fatter on the nose, right? That one I feel like the overall sort of proportion is a little bit better, if that makes sense. Yeah, but again, I feel like the wheels are the back wheels looking really good. This front ellipse is looking really good. Again, this one that's where it starts to fall apart. And again, here, not quite sure about that. We'll check that out. Cool. All right, I reckon we should have a quick break now, Simon, and I'll get all those into Photoshop and maybe just let me know which ones you want to sort of handle and give some critiques over, because again, we'll probably won't be able to do sort of super detailed feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I think I've just been writing down some general notes that maybe I could give to some people as well, just to keep going over some principles. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to like?
Yep.
Even if,
Well,
do you want me?
Do you want to do that now? And that way I'll get stuff sorted on my sort of PSD and I'll go in sort of the last sort of hour block. And maybe that way I can address some of the stuff you've sort of talked about.
Yep.
You know, when I sort of do the drawovers.
Yep.
Cool.
No,
That sounds good.
Okay, I'll just get a quick cup of tea and then I'll come back and I'll do some of that stuff. All right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, to like another later.
Just the same version. Yeah, that's that. Which I think kind of like
Well, I can but instead I caught up with my own name.
I basically like I just picked up a video because I've been using ZBrush since like high school.
yeah, I don't know. That's
And
like my
I just
only
picked up a video like
I can say is it.
I remember watching a video that night in depth, just like it was like an hour on just like how to use ZBrush.
Because once I because I didn't realize that like the long version
Just watching the style.
Yeah.
Just like playing with it.
So far down. This is literally what you can just do. I'm sure other cards that thought Dash are really close. This is what I would have done. Fold. Yes, my child. I'm a single father now. I know that's too much. I mean, I've seen worse because I used to play a part of gacha game. But this is as close as you can get for a game like that. But I've seen worse. I would. I'll put about 10. I would. Like I just don't want to do around like getting it much. It's like
I want to at least get the like the whole 20. Because, you know, the more you do, the more you listen. I mean, one thing I'm probably like doing the
just the graphic design.
This is literally my
I was
favorite part.
I do a lot of like measuring. I don't know. Like, if I get like sometimes when he says the amount of signs, it's like he draws the exact thing that I just did. It's like really like it's like I'm like
No, I just might lose was completely. This is my life. This is my man, male life. It's the old man. He's my profile picture. Oh, he's so cute. Yeah, I would just use fish.
Actually,
I'm just saying words.
well,
He's crazy. I should show him to create this design. He's a good.
that was funny because when I was looking at the diagrams, I was seeing like you know, the one that they gave. I was like,
Oh, he's such a good.
I think it's like the background is like it's a bit thicker.
I love that. That's excellent.
Yeah.
I made sure it's still within like the lines.
Oh, this guy.
It's funny that he didn't last forever.
He's such a
No.
She's literally my baby. I might cosplay her.
Oh, that's a line.
I don't understand how it's
Everything. Like it's
I
everything.
don't understand like this.
Shit, man, I got
Some gets
You got your digital. I like that.
Yeah, same.
I think I used to follow the artist.
I think I'm. We do it in character. If you're doing magic, it's
So we're doing like a fighting game, so we have to do that one character. Our major weapons, like kind of, and we have to pick like something based off IP. So something like the
rotation.
not style, but like it looks like a belong lens.
I'm literally my best behavior. I can really say things
I do.
about
Kind of, yeah.
How it looks.
KG with a filter.
I'll KG with a filter. If you want KG on a filter, just go on the You know.
It's like how
Yeah.
Just
And
the
then
overall look of it.
This one is so cool.
the style. Make it
He's a ninja with a gun.
I was gonna do your eyes.
Yeah. Because like the first week I did do the full
But you
style.
just gotta like make it do.
Get ready, get ready.
Yeah, no, I didn't all black out. I was like, David was like, so where I made your like trio out and like squash out boxes, even getting like screwed I was going to smash up, but like I wasn't too sure on it, so I'd rather make them like fire trouble yeah, so that's the least one.
That's a good thing. That's a biggie for us.
And then the splash art, like I really like the splash art, but I just don't know how to go together. So I just like don't like I love it, like in-game
Must be able to like set scene.
if you're doing like a splash art sort of thing, yeah, but with this, I'm gonna do
So you want it to like
something like this. Yeah.
oh like
I think that would be like a lot more.
like from a character menu.
You can do that. That's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, like I don't know. I just can't see like how this guy
All right, guys, let's I'm gonna do some of this stuff. And did I? Let's go back to. Okay, so I still want to quickly go over some like core concepts, and I feel like the TAs are really going over a lot of this stuff really good, but sometimes when you don't see like it live in doing it, then maybe it's like a bit hard to understand, but try not to forget all the things that we've been doing, right? So like, I'm still going to go, I just want to go over some of this stuff because I feel like some people still not quite, just maybe missed one thing or didn't quite get one thing. So let's keep going over it, right? So, and for those of you that are just like, this is so easy, just carry on. Just get into your rendering and do all that stuff. But just remember, like, Kona Vision stuff, I still feel like there's some people that not quite, doing that, okay? So remember, you want to start with, and I was going to do this, I was just going to do it in the break so you guys didn't see that, but I was like, maybe someone's forgotten how to do this bit, or maybe you didn't know how to do that. So I just thought I'd show it all again, right? So remember with the Kona Vision, you want to start with this like 90 degree, all right? So this is going to create your station point. So 90 degrees, all right? We just rotate that around, and I'm going to get it in the middle because I know that if it's in the middle, it's going to be like kind of relatively easy and nice to do, right? So let's do it like that. Then I can see here that this line doesn't quite go up high enough, but that's cool, right? And this one, we just need this to be a little bit longer here just to set this up. And then they're going to be our vanishing points, all right? Vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2. And then we've got our kind of station point here, all right? And then remember to get your kind of Kona Vision. I should do that a bit better, hey? All right. And then to get your Kona Vision, all right, remember it's just 30 degrees on this side. So you just like, you can see it's 90 degrees there in the Photoshop little tooltip thing. So it says 90 degrees. So 120 over this side, and that line can cut through wherever, right? And it doesn't have to be millimeter perfect, right? It's not the end of the world, but let's get it pretty good. And then we want 90 to 60, on this side. Over there. All right. And then just remember that really all we need that for, right, is just so we know where we're doing our like picture plane within, right? So remember, picture plane is the sheet of paper, right? So we just kind of do that. That gives us our like cone of vision. And you know, we're professionals, so once you've got all this, you can just save it out as whatever, you know, because then you've got your kind of you've got your kind of vision, and you can do a grid and everything, and it's all kind of sorted, right? So, but I think this is like the next bit is maybe the concept that's a bit abstract, and sometimes you don't understand. Most people that are having bit of trouble, like kind of drawing the Ferrari inside the cone of vision, are still doing this. They're like, I'm going to draw my Ferrari like in here, this big, or it's going to be like, you know, in here or whatever, right? You're drawing it too big inside the cone of vision. Okay, so remember that your picture plane, okay, which is your sheet of paper, can sit anywhere within inside this cone of vision. And this is what, like, Tim's been doing it a few times, right? But maybe just sometimes you've sort of not, maybe some people are just not sure like how that works or whatever, right? So this little box I drew now, this all fits within inside the cone of vision. So I could draw, you know, my most amazing Ferrari, and I could sit it in here, right? And, you know, it's all stupidly out of perspective and everything, right? But you could do that. Once again, this is probably going to end in like a bit of tears, okay? So remember, let's go back a step, right? And
I'm back.
Hey, Tim. So I'm just kind of going over some of those concepts just so everyone like is kind of understanding everything, right?
Yep,
So
cool.
Here we go. Let's take Sam's here, right? So I'm gonna, sorry, Sam. All right, but you're here, and we can do this, all right? All right. So, oops, I think I just stretched that weird. Okay, so we've got your car here. And this is what I think a lot of people are doing, right? They're kind of doing like cone of vision. And then they've got the sketch. So remember week one, you did sketches, right? They're kind of doing this cone of vision, and then they're getting up their perspective grid and kind of like putting their Ferrari in here, and then like, you know, dunzo. Or like, it's like this, and you're like, okay, that's where I'm going to draw my Ferrari, done, right? That's what I feel like a lot of people are doing, okay? What is better to do is this. Now, I'll do it, I probably need to draw up some grids first, right? And this is, Tim's been showing you guys this. I'm just repeating all the things that Tim's been doing, right? Okay, so, you know, this is the boring part. I'm going to draw out grid lines. Okay, some of this stuff might seem kind of simple, but I feel like some of this stuff is going to fix like 90% of things I'm looking at is like, there's still stuff at this level that if you fix it up, it'll make things a lot better, right? It'll make things easier. So yeah, just keep trying to like think all this stuff through. Probably should do that blue, otherwise we got the blue vanishing point. This is the reason why whenever Tim's doing the demo, he always like just goes, I'll just rough in the rough grids and not do it, because it just takes ages, right? We need to like, I think, Tim, we need to like have a joint like grid file that we that we put somewhere, so that like maybe just so people see that like, no, this is actually what we mean. This is actually what we want you to do, but we're just like, me and Tim are just trying to shorthand this because we don't want to go, you know, because it takes 10 minutes of like elevator music to set this freaking thing up all the time, right? So yeah, but like this is the kind of thing that you want to save out, because doing these technical drawings, like yes, if you're doing an illustration or something that's got different vanishing points, you want to move them around, do all that stuff, you totally can. But if you got something that's set up for like all your nice, you know, cubes and geoforms and, you know, technical drawings, then you can just save this out. You never have to do it again, right? So you don't have to do that. So I should listen to my own advice. Okay. So right, we've got this now. I'm being kind of stupid on purpose, all right? But let's just go with this, all right? So I feel like what lots of people are doing are kind of like, let's even take that picture plane out, all right? Because you're kind of doing this, and I can see it a lot. I see it with trees, I see it with Denzels, I see it with even the really good ones, right? This is what you're doing. So you're like, okay, I got to get this to kind of like fit in the grid, and where's it going? And you know, we're going to kind of do this, and we're going to get it to fit in, and you know, whatever, and we can get this to, and then you're like, okay, cool, and like now it's fitting like within my grid, and it's like kind of down here somewhere, and cool, donezo, I'm going to do this, all right? Okay, let's not do that. So what I think is better, and Tim shows us a bit, is like, you kind of want to do this. The more you do this, the smaller you make this, the easier this whole project becomes. Pretty much. Because the smaller you make it, the less distortion there is. All right? So what I'm doing, right?
Yep.
And let's bring it back to this, because once again, I'm being silly, but I'm trying to be silly so you can see what I'm doing. All right. So this is my A3 sheet of paper. Now this is the abstract concept that I don't think everybody quite gets, is that's an A3 sheet of paper too. Right? This is an A3 sheet of paper. Right? This is all irrelevant. This is not telling me how big my sheet of paper is. So I just remember back to my industrial design days. What I'd have to do with my A3 sheet of paper is I'd need to stick 4 A3 sheets of paper on here to get my, like, and I'd need to stick 2 more up here and 4 more along there, and I'd make this big grid, and then I could do my work out where my vanishing points are. Does that sort of make sense to everyone? Right? So if I got my picture plane like this, now I'm not, Sam, because you're in the class, that's why I chose yours. I'm not saying you did this wrong on the sketch. I'm just showing everyone a technique of like, I just tried to find a sketch, right? And then just grab that in and show what you can do. So I know that like the sketch kind of works down here a bit lower, right? And then what I want to do is I want to grab the sketch, right? And shrink this, you know, way down. And my Ferrari, you know, imagine this all lined up with the grid a bit better, right? Goes in there. So I'm just gonna like, I wouldn't do this, but we're just doing it for illustration purposes, all right? It's like my Ferrari goes in there. And I feel like this is probably a bit of a core concept that some people have forgotten about, right? When you just kind of like draw it out, all right? So like, that's kind of like, that's kind of important, is just that is that the cone of vision can be gigantic. It doesn't have to be A3 sheet of paper, doesn't just have to be that. Yep, inside, because the more you have it, like the more you have grid lines up here and grid lines down here, like the more distortion you will get, right? And that happens like, so let's bring up, Tree's not here either, but let's use him as the example, all right? That's where this stuff starts happening, because you're basically drawing this tree like massive in the cone of vision. Yep. So then what happens is, so the best thing to think about is the closer your vanishing points are to your sheet of paper, the more distortion you're going to have in your drawings. Does that make sense? The further you make those vanishing points away from the piece of paper, the less amount of distortion you'll have. The easier it makes the drawing to measure out and do. Because the more distortion you have, the harder it is, like essentially this, right? It's this. So this is like, and Tim showed you, me and Tim showed you a million times, like this is easy to measure. The flat square is super, super easy to measure. So the more you distort, so all that's happening is these squares are getting distorted, right? In perspective. And that's what you're trying to measure. So you basically, you know, these aren't a cube or a square or anything, but does that make sense? Right? So the higher up in here you get, the more distorted those diamonds get, the more distorted those squares get. You know, in here, they're distorted. Down here, distorted. That's what happens here. These diamonds are getting distorted, right? Does that make sense? Yep. So trees like, yeah, you know, everyone knows tree is like really good, right? So I'm just making a point is that even when someone's like really good at, so trees just like, and once again, I'm ragging on him, he's not here, right? But I'll message him and be like, check out the video. What was I going to say? Forgot what I was going to say. So like trees are really good at just like winging this. So I can tell from how he's drawing this that Tree's just making this shit up. Like he's making heaps of it up, but he's got a really good eye and he's good at like controlling the line quality where he can kind of wing it and it looks pretty good. But like if I measured over this is like terrible. Does that make sense? Like the actual stuff is not good because it's not measured properly. Yep. So that's why like this width looks really weird and stuff. Not weird, but it's out, right? And it might even be out as much as like somebody else who's having proportional issues. But because Tree's just got a good eye and good at winging stuff, he's winging it. Does that make sense? Yeah, and it's just like some of these principles that are like none of this thought has gone into that drawing. Does that make sense? Because you get into like, and I'm not saying that's like a fatal error or anything. It's more like you want to draw the thing, and so you get in and you're like, okay, I got my grid lines and I do this, and you just forget about all this stuff, and then it's only 45 hours into the drawing and the rendering and everything where you're like, oh my god, I should have paid attention to this stuff at the start. Does that make sense? But like if you didn't do it at the start, you just completely screw yourself over. Yeah, because you can't like, that's what Tim was saying. He's like, okay, so Tim sugarcoated it nicely, right? He's like, you can render all this up and it's going to look pretty good. You can, but it's polishing a turd and then rolling it in glitter. Does that make sense? So you want to like try and get the foundation right first, right? And then when you like do all your rendering and everything, then it's like on top of that really good base. So it doesn't matter if you like haven't done this or whatever. It's like it's kind of up to you. Like if you want to go back and you want to redo and check things and stuff, like you can. If you want to go forward and just get it done, you can. And like to be honest, with the grading, it doesn't make a difference, right? What I'm looking at is like your progression of how you go from week 1 where you did the little sketches of the Ferraris to like week 12 where you're trying to like render up a, you know, kind of refined drawing, and everyone's going to be like a different level of kind of doing that. Okay, so that's that, right? So that's that kind of principle of like, let's kind of draw this a lot smaller, you know, inside the cone of vision. I think that's going to help a lot of people, like, because some people are still really having trouble with that, like just drawing phase of like blocking in and getting it right. And I think a lot of times it's that stuff that's going on, right? So once again, like from here, you need to get the true cube. Yep. So I feel like lots of people are having heaps of trouble with their wheels, and it just feels like your wheels aren't like a square. Now, what happens is, remember, the further you get where these diamonds are more distorted, all right, the harder it is to meet, like the more distortion you're going to get in your true cube. We all know that, right, from first year, yep? So like in first year, remember we're doing like a bedroom scenes and everything? You guys all did that, right? And I'm like, draw some cubes over here, you know, draw some down here, you know, see what they look like. All the ones in here look good. Does that make sense? As soon as you draw them out here, right, the cubes start looking, it's like, it looks a bit tall, or it looks a bit wide, or it's like, so just, if you draw in here, you don't ever have that problem. Does that also make sense? Yeah? Because I feel like some of you, it's like, oh yeah, now I'm drawing my Ferrari, my cube looks bad, and I don't know why. Tim's like, your ellipses look wrong for your wheels. And you're like, but I measured the goddamn thing 35 times. and it's like, it's right. And I bet if Tim sort of went over it, it'd be like, it's right. But what happens is you're just not understanding like the position that you chose to draw the thing in the first place is making it hard for you to get a nice looking true cube. Because we know that when we draw the cubes out here,
Yeah.
they don't look like cubes. Does everyone agree? We've all done that assignment, right? Yep. So that's just part of the problem. I just see it and I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's just like, it's like, it's not even that you're doing it wrong, because most of the time, like, you're doing it right. You're doing it right. It's just the math of the grid is not helping you out, right? Because yeah, just remember this is all like geometric kind of shapes and maths and stuff. So,
and remember that, like, this will really start to catch you when you try and draw scenes, right? Like, I feel like it's like what Simon's sort of saying is, yeah, like, and I think again, like, Tree is probably one of those people who maybe is sort of has a good ability to kind of draw, has a good eye. And I would say what would happen is, like, if you just kind of keep practice drawing, right, you get good and you get better and better and better. The problem is, again, if you want to do some of these more technical things, which often are required by the entertainment industry, right? It often is that, you know, and also these things are hard and therefore they're valuable. That's what I feel like also people need to remember, is that other people find this challenging too.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Even like really good people,
like,
really good people find this hard.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is, you know. So if you can get good at it, you have skills that are rare. They're more rare, right? And, you know, there's just tons of jobs where, like, if you can do that, you'll get the job, you know? Like, if someone can see that you have, like, and again, I've said this before, you don't have to be the best in the class. You just have to know the basics here and understand how they sort of function, right? It's very rare that you're going to have to, like, you know, utilize these particular skills, right? Because often, you know, like, I think drawing animation backgrounds or something, you know, is another one of those things where it's like, you know, you really need to know your perspective. But again, there's not that many people who can do that, you know, and understand how to sort of, you know, just consistently keep, you know, drawing these scenes and stuff. You don't have to be the best in the class to get one of those jobs, but you do have to understand this stuff, right? And understand why things are happening. You know, you might be given photos and be like, hey, draw a background like this photo. I mean, you've got to actually understand how to break that down and draw it. Again, it doesn't have to be that good, but if it's really wrong, you have a lot of trouble, right? And I think often what happens, back to what I was saying, is, yeah, artists who are good. Something fell down in my room. It's right. Artists who are good, often you get better and better and better, but there will come a time where, again, like, if you're asked to do these things, you're going to have increasing struggle town when it comes to, like, getting results and getting higher level results. Do you know what I mean? And it can become really hard to do the archaeology to figure out what's wrong. So the Ferrari is the best sort of, and the reason why we do this is because this tells you where you're getting these things wrong, without us having to draw crazy scenes and things like that. So, but these issues might be better illustrated, right? You know, if we had a whole year to do just full on perspective, you know, like just full time, you know, you'd probably do more different exercises and stuff. But yeah, a lot of these things where you're trying to draw two boxes and make them look like boxes, if you're just drawing one box, it doesn't matter. If you're just drawing one character, it doesn't matter. If you're just drawing one car, well, you kind of need to know enough if you want to make it look hyper detailed. But it's when you're drawing the scenes, or again, you got to draw the same background but from different angles. That's when, like, if you really don't understand this, if you're trying to just sort of draw your way through it without the knowledge, and you do have skills and you have practice, it's just going to be hard, right? It's going to be more frustrating. You're going to have more situations where you're like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just like, you know, you're just trying to make it work. And I'm confident that you will find a way to make it work. The problem is just like, look, guys, if you just learn this, then you'll be heaps more relaxed in that position. Does that make sense? It's not going to make you like 100% a better artist, right? In all instances, but I guarantee it'll make your working career a lot more chill, right? If you really understand this, it means you're just not going to be intimidated by some of those jobs, right? Like that's the real difference. So I think often people are like, oh, I don't need that because I'm doing this, that, and the other. And again, like the main benefit is just that you're going to have the competency to do these things, and you're not going to be as stressed, you know? And you're not going to be like, I don't know why that's wrong. You know, at least even if you suck at perspective, if you know how it's done and how to get better, you can be like, you know what? I know why this isn't working. And you can go home and work on it in your own time. And you know what I mean? Like get better at it and then do better at your job. And again, it's not to make better art. It's so that your experience of it is better and more relaxed, right? And I can't stress how that's how I see the difference, right? I could always draw stuff and kind of make stuff look interesting and cheat the backgrounds and find a way through, right? I mean, I did that for a long time, but it was stressful, you know, and it's not good stress, you know, it's it's serious kind of, you know, that sort of existential dread sort of stress, right? It's just so much nicer to be able to understand these things, right? Even though it is a bit of a pain and technical and stuff. Anyway, that's all I sort of say.
Yes. No, I agree with all of those things. Yeah, and then, so that was good because Tim was just...
Yeah, giving you some time to draw a billion lines.
Yeah, well, and get these. Yeah, so like this bit is like super important, right? And one of the other things I want to explain is that if I was, so this is also something that kind of happens, right? Is this, there's a lot of error in this. Does everybody see that? Right.
Yeah.
Is this a true cube? Probably not. If I was in industrial design class, I would get in trouble for that. They'd be like, what are you doing? Because basically like...
some dirty looks.
Yeah, because I've got like vanishing point here, and then I'm like, oh, sorry, horizon line. Then I'm like, there's my vanishing point. And then I'm just like doing lines, you know, from here. Right, because the line tool here is like not very thin, right? So there's a lot of margin for error. And when you're doing your true cube, just remember that it is dependent on like how accurate you are with these lines. So you might also sometimes be like, oh, I've done a true cube, but if someone goes in and it's like, well, it's actually like a, you know, 2 mils out here and 2 mils out here, and your measuring point is 2 mils out and things like that. So you have to, the way that we combat that without being like so anal retentive that it's like insane and making everyone draw like with a 0.5, you know, rotoring like mechanical pencil, and that's why those things exist, because this is what people used to do, right? Is just use your eye, right? And that's what Tim does all the time, where he's like, the cube just looks like too fat or too skinny or too tall or too white, right? Just use your eye to kind of get it right, because it's not foolproof. It's not going to be 100% accurate unless you're like literally in there, like, you know, like zooming up 300% to get it exactly on the dot. Does that make sense? Because I feel that's also something where you're like, yeah, I've measured it, and it's like, oh, good, but you're like, yeah, but I could just tell like when you did it, it wasn't quite right. Yep, you know. So like use your eye, and that's what I was doing there already. Mine like looked a bit kind of like wide down here. I'm like, okay, well, you know, it's probably just my grid's out a tiny bit and stuff. You know, it's like I didn't do the. So just remember when you're doing your cube, you got this measurement here, right? That's your up and downy one, and then these ones you just duplicate that across. So you've got like a T shape on the ground, and then you can find your measuring points, right? But you got to like kind of use your eye a bit, and then you can get it like, yeah, I reckon that looks like pretty good, right? It's never going to be 100. It's never going to be like the actual. It's never going to be that. It's like, sorry, I'm holding my hand on the table. It's never going to be like a cube that's sitting on the table, right? It's not that. It's just your drawing of it, you know? So, yeah, so once you've got this, and this is where I feel like, so I see lots of people, all right, can you guys all see that like this? Okay, now I'm going to be I'm not trying to be mean. All right. This and where was? That way? No. Hang on. Uh. Sorry, 2 seconds. All right, so to varying degrees is like you can tell. Oops. Oh, just pasting the same thing over and over again. Is like, okay, so if I come in here and start looking at this, can you guys all see like where it feels like the vanishing points are on this? It feels like they're a long way away. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I know that I'm going to like not get too much distortion, right? And then with here, it feels like the vanishing point is just up there with yours, Erin, right? Okay. Trees. It's almost like I can see the vanishing point there, right? With this one, Denzel, it feels like I can see the vanishing point just up there. Does that make sense? Like whenever I see this drawing, I'm like, yeah. Once again, let's say this, but like if I'm trying to do a cool version of a Ferrari, right? These are awesome, right? To do like a cool, because we like distortion, we like things coming at us and foreshortening and doing all that stuff. But for like measuring things out and for handing it over to a 3D modeler and stuff, it's like not as useful. And like for learning how to draw this stuff in perspective, not as useful. So this is sort of what I want you to do is like have this, and there's some people that are doing it really well, where like you look at the drawing and the vanishing points feel like a long way off, and it's like, that's good. That makes it easier for you. That makes it easy for you to do, right? So then you've got this, all right? And then the next bit is, because I want to go over this as well, is like, because this is once again a little bit abstract and important to understand. So once I've got where these things kind of are, I made a mess of this Photoshop file. Anyway, then what I want to do is like, let's draw in some more grid lines that are like around the car, all right, from the vanishing point. And I'm doing with like a thinner line, and I was doing thick lines because I was being silly and showing you guys that people do thick lines, and it's not very accurate, all right? So I just want to draw these, and once again, like Tim's shown this a million times. I'm just doing it with. I
think it just feels like it takes
maybe
longer
it's different
when you're doing it.
Yeah,
it just feels like you're wasting time, you know. Because again, like we're doing these demos, and I'm like, oh man, this is like not fun. But probably if you look at the clock, it's like 40 seconds have elapsed, But when we're doing menial tasks like that, it just doesn't feel like we're making progress.
Right, so I want to just add in these grid lines, as many as I
That
can
is
kind of
until
do.
you like spend 4 hours trying to fudge some detail and realize that it's just because you were lazy drawing that one line.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there are tools and things you can use to make that sort of stuff more accurate. Again, as Simon was saying, it's easy to make up files and have these sort of grids pre-existing and do it once really well. But yeah, it doesn't actually take that long when you do it.
Once you've done this stuff, so now we've got the cone of vision, we've got our measuring points, all right? We've got this stupid pitch plane up here, all right? We've kind of got this station point, all right? And even this stuff, we actually don't need any of it, right? It's just to it's just to sort out the structure of things. But once you've sorted that out, and what am I doing anyway? Because I've drawn stuff on different layers, all right? Once you have done that, you can literally go like this around my A3 sheet of paper, remember? I go like that, and then I can just crop it, right? And you've seen Tim do that lots of times, right? So then what I want to do is I've taken my A4 sheet of paper and I've turned it into like a postage stamp, right? In terms of the resolution. So what I need to do is I need to then go back, all right, and make this 4,500 pixels or whatever, right? And we're just going to zoom that way back up. Okay, and then I've got my grid in, I've got my true cube, and once I've got one true cube, all the rest of your cubes should be true if you measure them out right. Does that make sense, everyone? Yeah. So once I've got that one, I can just base everything off of that. So then if I want, 5 cubes long or whatever, right? I can just come in there, and remember we can do all our little measuring tools, and then I can, have a cube. Oops. I can put a cube here and here and here and here, and we're just going to remember, just measure those across and across, across. You guys know how to do that, right? But once I've got that in, then you can just basically plot out that whole little ground plane. And then you just want to plot out the base and the wheels and so on and so forth, right? Easy. Yep, that part's not that difficult. But I feel like lots of people are kind of skipping how to get to this point, And to me, I'm just well, you can skip it, but you just inevitably, everybody has to redo it at some point. So I'm just if you don't skip it, then you don't have to go back and fix it later, right? So yeah, it's pain at the start, at the front end, but later it just makes it so much easier, right? So yeah, as soon as I do this, you can start to see, and Sam, you can probably, you go oh, these wheels are too small and I need to fix them. And then once you got this, then you just start dividing all the bits and pieces, all right, and doing that. So one of the other things that I kind of want to go over is, and let's just do a bit of tracing paper over this, just so we've got that grid. Now let's try and bring up this little orthographic. So I feel like one of the main things that I see, there's another thing that people are doing, right, is you've kind of got the front of your Ferrari in that you start to do, even that's not a good line, and just make sure you're always drawing through with those things, right? And let's just say this is the front part of the Ferrari. It feels like lots and lots and lots of people are just doing this. And I think that's all right, and there we go. All right? But remember all the things you can do with the curves and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Find your center, because that's the most important thing, right? And Tim was going over this a bit last week, but you can still tell from people's Ferraris that you're not doing this, all right? So find your center, think about where you want, your curve to go. So it is a slightly different curve. It curves around kind of at the top, right? And then it goes kind of longer at the bottom. It starts there and curves kind of down here. Does that make sense? Right? You can measure that curve. So then basically, and you can do this in a million different ways almost in perspective, right? So for example, I could draw a little line across here to go to that side. Let's do it a bit more accurately and just make that smaller. So I can draw a line kind of across there, right? And where that point hits, I know that's where that part of the curve is, all right? And then you can, like, you know, put a line down here and think about where the start of that goes, you know. And like, to be honest, even if you just like, I'm just gonna like eyeball that bit, I mean, that's probably like 30 times better than what lots of people have been doing, right?
Yeah.
So
That's the key, right? Is like, if you just eyeball some of those things, it's like you'll be 10% off with the eyeball, but it'll make your overall sort of drawing like, you know, 50% better, right? Like 100% better. So it's better to eyeball, right, those measurements than it is to kind of eyeball the whole thing.
Does that sort of make sense, guys? Yep. So then, you know, I can start to see where this one's, you know, cutting in, right? And then I can start to be like, okay, that one goes down to there, and we just want to have that one come across to there. And then we kind of come down, you know, here, right? And then this one, you know, kind of cuts through like there, and we, you know, have that curve kind of coming down there, and it, you know, sort of ends there, and we got it right. And then all of a sudden you've got this, you know, thing that's going to be much more accurate, not very good, but much more accurate than just like kind of, you know, just making it up, right? And it's the same thing with like we can probably explain it better on the top, right? The cockpit or whatever.
Yep.
All right, and let's
and it's the same thing. And again, it's all just like doing arches, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so much of these curves is just doing arches, and again, it's the same stuff we did in the boat, right?
Yep. So you just measure that through the middle, because remember, like the center line's like super important, right? And then you got to come over here and try and, you know, hit that. And you can see, like, look how crappy, like, so I'm basically trying to measure a true cube of lines that are this thick. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's like, it is not going to be like quite right. So you got to actually get kind of reasonably accurate with those things, like zoom in a bit and kind of use your tools and stuff. And yeah, you can see here, like, that's not quite, oops, that's not quite through the middle. Yep, and then it's just going like, I want my, you know, without sort of looking at the reference or whatever, right? I want the curve of the cockpit or whatever to kind of like start there, and then let's say we want it to just, you know, I'm just making this up, right? But you can do it properly. I want it to, like, you know, hit here and hit here, right? So then we just, you know, have a spot over here, and then we, you know, can measure that one across and like draw through, get that one over there. And then we just want it to go from there to there, around to here, and back to that, you know. And once again, like Tim was showing last week, you know, just, it feels like lots of people are like just winging those things where you can just measure them. And then if you need another one that's sitting up above it, you can just measure that one again on top. You know, if you want another one that's sitting below it or outside of it, or sprockets on the wheels, or whatever you're doing, you can just measure those things out, right? So I feel like when people are getting into the organic stuff, they're just getting a bit scared. You're just getting a bit scared. You're just like, I don't know how this goes. Just remember, you can like just measure all those things. Like, you just do your little points in space. And then, like, that's the cool thing, is like, when I see Darren Quatch doing his like ink pen sketches, right, like this, you know, he's doing all this kind of stuff. He literally does that stuff. he'll get like the points and stuff and just kind of match them up in space, and then he'll like, yeah, and then he can just like sketch it
Yeah.
out all really quick, and then yeah, get all these points working good like on the ground, and yeah, all of these things, right? Like he just does the same things, but then there'd be lots of errors in this because he's just like doing it fast and not measuring it properly. But he's using
Yeah,
like
he
all
would
the
probably.
same principles.
That's why they call it a sketch.
Yeah.
That's why those guys like Scott Robertson and there's like, oh, this is just a sketch. I'm just being, and you're like, what the fuck? What's sketchy about it? You know? And it's like, oh, the perspective was probably, you know, like 5% off. Yeah, the real trick is, I think, a lot of artists do this. So even intuitive artists that sort of, you know, aren't studying all this technical stuff, they're going to be doing it a little bit in their head. You know, often people do that ghosting, you know, where you kind of like, you know, you kind of like find a point over the left, and then you kind of ghost the line for like where that proportionally is going to be on the right, and you sort of put that in. So, you know, you're not often seeing it. You're not often going to see where people are measuring these things, you know, but often even just like, again, ghosting a line, what people are doing is they're like practicing it, and then they kind of put in the right one. And it's kind of like they're calibrating in their brain, like what that sort of shape would be. So, you know, there is a lot of this calculation that's sort of happening, and this just formalizes it, right? But yeah, people are doing it with little dots, you know what I mean? A few little marks here or there, or, you know, just in their head. Yeah, you know, but this is how you learn how to do it fast.
Yeah, and to get the, like, once again, just like sort of very diagrammatically, which just means a crappy version of it, right? It's like when you're trying to do the body of the car and stuff, like I feel like some people are still, you know, having a bit of trouble with that sort of thing, right? But the same thing with the body of the car is just think about like the shape that you want, right? And then, you know, how it sort of like, it kind of tapers in a bit, you know, just a little bit down here, right? And sort of like tapers in a little bit down here, and this one, you know, kind of does this, right? And then you match these up. Now, once again, you can kind of measure all that all the way through, all right? But that's not what I want to show just with this bit. But the other thing that you want to do is then once you work out the shape that you want this to be, then you can put the shape, you know, back here, right? And I know I don't need to do this because the TAs have already done it like 10 bazillion times. So here's one I prepared earlier.
Yep.
That Duncan prepared earlier. Right, which is, oh, why is that? Just keep doing that. Come on. Oh, hang on. Hello. Okay. Sorry, Sam. Just keep using yours. But that's what I've seen the TAs do this like a million times, right? Is like that's what Duncan is talking about here, and you can see like Duncan's just doing this as a sketch with no grid or anything, right? And it still looks like super structural. So like if you get the structure, like if you kind of just have that thought process of what you're doing, you can make it look good even without the grid. Does that all make sense as well? But it's like the thought process of how you're doing it. So you can see here, you're getting this shape in here, and then it's just mirroring that shape back there. And then you just connect these dots. So this shape is smaller than that one, and then you just connect them through. So Seska, that's kind of like one of the things you need to do, right? Like with yours, is like this part here is smaller than this part here. Does that make sense? Like if you think of it as like an orange and you're cutting it in slices, right? It's like this slice of orange is bigger than this slice of orange. Yep. And then you just want to connect those dots up, but you want to have this structure like just running all the way through. Yeah. And then you can see how important, like, because obviously we're going over this class, Duncan's trying to show this, is like how important that center line is. Yep. And to find that center line, you've got to get the center line on the ground, right? Because guess what? Otherwise, you're winging this, right? Because you don't like, because you can draw a line. So Duncan can draw a line here, right? He doesn't actually know, and I'm not letting the cat out of the bag, but he doesn't actually know that's the center, All right. Once again, this is just like diagrammatic, but you can wing this because if you get it there or get it there or get it there, it's going to look okay. All right. Does that all make sense? But the only way you find the center is by having this come down here, working out where that sits on the ground, and then finding out where that part sits in space, right? And you can't do it like that either because you don't know where the fuck the center is there. Does that make sense? You need to be able to work out the width of this to find out where the goddamn center is. Does that make sense? Yep. So sorry, I'm getting a bit potty mouth, aren't I? No, right? And once again, like, I'm not saying that this is wrong because this is just like, it's not like this is some error of how to do it, but does that make sense? As in like, you can actually get it quite accurate. So whenever I see like, all right, let's go back to, whenever I see like this, so Murray, like you've done a pretty good job, right? Come on. Why are you doing this to me? And Tim and me both know we'd like, as soon as we see like this stuff, I'm like, Tim and I know you just winging all this bit. It's like, yeah, because you can kind of tell that like, I can't see like the measurement underneath. Like, how do you know where the center is, right? And then, you know how sometimes you do things and they start like looking a bit like twisted? You'll draw it, it's like, oh, by the back, it's like kind of looking like the car kind of like goes around the corner a bit or whatever. It's just because of that, because you haven't done the center. And like here, you can see this, Murray, like, this is what I'm talking about. It's like, that looks kind of cool, but it doesn't look completely accurate, right? Yeah. So, yeah, and I'm assuming like, because you haven't done the center line under there, like, or you've done it a bit and then like in some bits and then not all bits. Yeah. So like, it's all good. It's not like the end of the world. It's not, like I said, it's not like you guys fail or do it, but it's just, you can, when you work your way through that, it's actually like, it's not that difficult. Like if you just start going through and lining all the bits up, and I feel like that's what the TAs struggle with, because it's just like, and I'm going to tell you this again, and I'm going to tell you this again. So like, but it must be that it's like not, the fact that we have to do that all the time is like, that's where I'm like, don't worry about it, guys. It's obviously something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. It's not clear at the start. I don't know. Did you not find it clear at the start, Duncan, as well, like in second year or something? Like it's just, it's a lot of information. It takes a lot to learn. It's like, even just kind of knowing about the picture plane and how that can be, how you can change that around and stuff. It's like, that's step one, then step two is like blah, blah, blah. Then step three, it's just like, there's a million different steps, and you kind of stuff one up and the whole thing, like, you're like, oh, this is like, how do I do this kind of thing? But obviously Tim and I are doing this over and over again. You kind of like go, oh, no, you do this and then you do that and then you do this and you do that bit. And that bit will let you do this bit, and then so on and so forth. So, I think just
it's sequence, right? So much of stuff is sequence. It's the same with painting. It's the same with a lot of art, right? A lot of what you're trying to do is you're doing the thing, but the way you make it look good and the way it kind of flows for you is to find the right sequence, so that you sort of get a feel for what needs to be done and that sort of stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Yep.
Yeah, and just remember, like, this stuff's not that easy, right? I mean, it's the point is like, there's no mystery. It's that's the whole point, is like, you don't need to look up at artists and be like, oh man, that person, they're just magic, or they're just born that way, they just have talent. Don't ever look at a Darren Quatch or one of those people and just be like, wow, that's a sketch. Maybe he was just born that way. It's like, nah, you just learn all this stuff and put some time in.
I know the crazy fucked up art center assignments he had to do. Like,
yeah,
they literally like try and kill you. That's their mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes people really good.
Yeah. And just to understand, but this is generally challenging. And again, if you can get good at it, that puts you again in a good position, right? Like, if stuff is hard, it's normally means like, it's not always, right? Not everything that's hard is worth doing, but this is one of those things I feel like that's worth doing, and it is difficult. And you know, if you get good at it, it does mean that again, you're going to be able to get some of those jobs done that other people are going to struggle with, right? And you know, there's value in that for you.
And I just got one last thing, and then I'll hand it over to you again, Tim, and you can do some feedback. But you know, I found this really interesting, and when we were talking just to Marissa before about the drawing and painting and all that kind of stuff, right? Is just like don't, for all of you guys, don't limit yourself. Right? We had this kind of chat with the first years. Like, we are teaching you all of this stuff so that if you choose to do characters, you choose to do environments, you choose to do stylized, you choose to do realistic artwork, that's your choice, not because you can't. Lots of times, people make those choices because they can't do the other stuff. Does that make sense? You don't want to be in that camp. You don't want to be in the camp of like, oh yeah, I make all my I do all my art, you know, children's book style because like I'm shit at anatomy, all right? And I don't understand the Eric. I don't understand how any of that goes. So I choose to draw my arms with like goopy lines because I don't understand anything. Does that make sense? If you want to do that stuff because you understand all the other stuff and you make a choice as to what you want to do, that's completely different. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's completely different, and that's empowering. That's the bit where we want you guys to go, and that's why we do these stupid assignments of like Ferraris and cubes and things. Because we find that if we teach you all this stuff, then you can choose what it is that you want to do. You can choose how you want to apply it. So, Mike and Anders, right? One of the amazing landscape painter. He works on all the DreamWorks movies. Like he's the production designer on like Shrek and Puss in Boots and all the DreamWorks movies, right? And then he goes out and does all these paintings and stuff. And the other day, so he's doing this, he's doing this, he's doing this. Mike and Hez, one of my favorite like landscape, kind of guys. And then he posts this up. I'm like, okay, Mike knows how to draw. Yeah. So like he for 15 years he hasn't posted up a character. Yeah. And then he posts up that, and you're like, motherfucker. You know what I mean? But that's what I mean is like you can, and I think this is what Tim was sort of trying to explain before, is like, yeah, you can say that you want to paint or you want to draw, you want to do stylize or whatever, but don't limit yourself by you're choosing to do that because you can't do the other stuff. Does that make sense? There's a very big difference, right? And one's really shit and will lead you to not being a good artist ever. And the other one will lead you becoming like world-class artists. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, I think this kind of stuff is really important. Is like, yeah, lots of people I know, they're like, oh, I've had this before, like, we had like a masterclass person come in, they did environments or whatever, and they're like, oh, can't you do, something about characters? It's like, I just choose not to do characters. Not like I can't do them. Just I like doing environments better or whatever. Or other guys like do characters, but they're also really good at environments, and they just choose to do that. Yeah. And the other thing is like when you see Jamie Jones, like. So you tell me, Tim, how did he start his painting when he was at CDW? Because you remember that.
Well, he starts with a thumbnail, and then he does like he does like a little sort of drawing to kind of. Well, I think he does like a black and white rough from a thumbnail in a sketchbook, and then sometimes he does like a drawing over that, and then he like paints under that. But he still does the drawing, right?
That's right.
He's not like. Yeah,
that's right, and
there's still a drawing there, and the drawing's highly accurate.
Yeah,
it's not hyper detailed, but it's accurate, and that is the difference, right? It doesn't have to be like accuracy. It doesn't have to be putting everything in, but what he does put in is accurate.
And then I remember at like one of the first masterclasses we did where we had James Pake out, and it was one of the ones you were doing, Tim. And James was like, he started putting a spaceship in this environment painting, and he was like, wasn't working, and he would just like paint it in, and you could tell he was like, fuck, like I can't get this to work. So he literally just sat there for like 40 minutes, and guess what he did? he drew on top of it. He did a drawing and got it sorted, and then yeah. So just like those two, they're not mutually exclusive. They're like, you get better at drawing, you get better at painting, you get better at painting, you get better at drawing. They're the same thing, because it's just what's going on in your head. So just try not to think about that. So yeah, I think like when you do say things, sorry, I don't mean to just keep banging on about it, Marissa, right? But when you do say things like it's a bit cancerous to what you're doing, right? It's kind of like it's choose out like your ability to like want to learn various things. You know, it's like I said, you then get into this point where you're like, I'm choosing not to do that because I can't, not because I'm making a choice about how I want to approach doing art. So
even it'll be like, you know, because again, I feel like you can make a living as someone who is focusing on different elements of art, like not the structural stuff, right? But you know, that has to be something that obviously is already sort of working for you. If you're thinking about sort of, you know, how you build your skill set, right? Like, is that something that sort of is working for you? And then you just do have to understand that, you know, that puts your career down a particular trajectory. And, you know, like, it won't just be that. You know, when I was drawing comics, I, you know, would sort of be like, oh, should I take on this project? Maybe there'll be too many buildings in that comic. Like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I would start to be more fearful about the projects I was taking on, you know? And when someone would be like, you know, oh yeah, you've got to do this thing. And it requires that perspective or whatever. I kind of knew I wasn't good at that. And so I'd sort of be, you know, like more hesitant. And I wasn't really making choices that were based on creatively what I wanted to do, right? Again, I was making them based on a little bit more reacting and a little bit more of fear of like, oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, that's going to be too challenging. You know, I'll sort of handle it this way. And again, the thing is that takes up a lot of energy. And the problem with style as like a major thing is the best you can kind of hope for from a commercial aspect is that people do like the style you have, right? If they don't, you're kind of screwed. So if you're sort of thinking like, maybe I will just do more art stuff, you know, or more, you know, things where, again, the technical side of it isn't as important. The pool of jobs that you can get is small. Now, again, that's not the worst thing because focus can be good, but I think the real problem with that is often what happens, Simon, is that like styles and what is in fashion in publishing or situations where you're, you know, getting other people to hire you and stuff like that, it's very fashion based, right? And I think like I know, you know, there was lots of illustrators who would, you know, kind of have a particular style and it would sort of work and it wouldn't be based on any sort of foundational sort of stuff. A lot of that stuff was more abstract. And, you know, like if you're like the top 1% of people using that style or sort of making that stuff, maybe, you know, forever after you'll kind of be like, you know, people always sort of hire you to do stuff. But anyone who's sort of working ancillarily in that style is often can run into major trouble, right? And, you know, it means often in the later half of your career, you either need to change your sort of style, you know what I mean? Or, you know, your work kind of dries up. Because if, you know, if people really like it, you're just going to have to do more and more of that kind of thing, right? So for instance, like, I'll share my screen here. Yeah, and so it's just got to realize, right, like that it restricts you a little bit, and you have to be very, very conscious of how that functions. It's not something you want to do just, again, as Simon's saying, because like, you know, that other stuff is hard, because lots of stuff will be hard, right? There's always something hard, right? There's no easy way to kind of make that sort of work. And if you're sort of saying, well, you know, maybe I'm just going to sort of have stuff that's more stylized or whatever, you know, again, that's sort of fine. But, you know, a good example would be like sort of Mambo art, this is another one of these things where people probably don't.
You're so
don't,
old, Tim.
Don't know
Mambo
what
art.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mambo was like old when I was young. Right, I'm just getting it all back because I think that
when Tim and I were teenagers, Mambo was like pretty big deal.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. You guys are probably like, Mambo, what? Right? And you had like Mambo was like it was a cool surf brand or something, right? And you had this dog and all this kind of illustrations, and you'd have like sort of, you know, the t-shirts, right? And this was like the coolest thing. And, you know, a lot of people kind of had that type of art. There was this particular type of art. I don't know what you'd sort of call it, but it's a bit sort of, like Dali, like surreal, editorial style illustration.
Joe, you don't understand. Like Mambo jeans were like $250. Yeah, and like
no, this was like you were friggin' cool.
Yeah,
right. You were like,
it did end up in Target,
right?
That there was like 15 years before that where it was like, not some shitty home brand thing. it was literally like, if you had a Mambo t-shirt, you were the coolest kid in town. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Armani, or, you know, like even Armani's like down market. What would it be like? You know, it was like, I don't know.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. Continue on.
There's nothing really cool. All those things are owned by these big brands now. So it's kind of a bit gross. But the point is, like, a lot of people were like, oh, maybe I'll use this style, or you kind of say, oh, my style's a bit similar to that. And, you know, you grow up sort of liking that, and there's some people having real success. Now, probably the couple of people who started this still get work. But there's probably like 10,000 other illustrators who are like, oh, jump on that bandwagon, and it's sort of style over sort of structure or whatever, and you have like a very stylized thing, right? Like whatever it is. And these were quite sort of like challenging sort of things, right? You know, they were like gross and like a bit offensive and that sort of thing. But yeah, like the point is that there's a lot of people not working, you know, because they kind of had this style and they thought like, oh, it's kind of working now, maybe it'll keep working. You know, typically these things come and go, and, you know, you're just faced with different challenges, right? So I guess the point here is like the structural drawing stuff is certainly a challenge. It's not for everyone. But again, not everyone has to be like Darren Quartrate. You can be like this. But if you can understand how to draw and also do some of this, then it means if you do need to swap or pivot later on, right, you have a foundation that underlies that, and that's a little bit easier. But yeah, the stylistic stuff and the capital A art stuff is very, very fickle from a long-term career perspective, right? The best thing that can happen is you do get hot, you do get picked up. But basically, if that happens, I'm like, save every single penny, put it in like an index fund, and you know, live like a pauper, because at some point, no one is going to care about your silly Mambo art, right?
So type in like
throw it away.
Type in like Quentin.
Like they don't want to burn it.
Type in Quentin Blake illustration.
Yeah.
So here's where I think like kind of the flip side is. Right. So Quentin Blake does very, you know, Roald Dahl, right? Books and stuff.
Yep.
So you guys have probably all seen it. Everyone's seen it, right? But here's someone who I think draws very whimsical, cute, you know, things, but like he can draw. You know, like you can tell that he understands perspective, and guess what? He's been around for like 60 years. Yeah, like it's not a surprise, right? It just, it's all whimsical and stylized and all that stuff, but it's got that, like it's beautiful drawings, right? You know, it's got that structure and the perspective. You know, even those stupid little boxes he's got there, you can tell like they're kind of in perspective, and he wouldn't draw them out because it'd be
there's consistency to them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But,
So
but
it's-
good details with the costumes, the gesture, the character.
Yeah.
There's banana fingers, but they have feeling.
yeah.
You know, and you sort of know what you're going to get, and it can sort of change, and you can see you know, how you could ask him to do something different to this, and you'd probably get something, right? You know, there's buses and buildings and stuff. You see how those buildings there, they seem like they're kind of in perspective enough. You know what I mean? Like you see this, it's like there is an underlying thing there. So yeah, as you were saying, Simon, yeah,
Yeah, but does that make sense, everyone?
A good-
So, like, once again, this just comes back to choice, right? Like, Quentin is choosing to draw like that, not because he can't, but because he wants to. Does that make sense? Don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
The-
like honestly, I think this is, if you're into that kind of thing, I think this is the way to go, right? Is to really find a way to do something that again is rare, that's more unique to you, and is harder for other people to compete with. Because yeah, there's probably a whole bunch of other people who copied his stuff, you know, and sort of didn't do as well now. But yeah, you really have to think about that, right? It's not as reliable. It's that sort of pathway. And again, this is one of those things, right, where we're sort of saying that there is a lot of work for artists these days, and most of it is in the entertainment industry. And in many cases, a lot of it is production work, right? It's not this creative stuff where you're, you know, like you're creating your whole little world like this. I think there's lots of opportunity for people to do this and sort of do both. But yeah, this is a little bit more along the lines of your sort of traditional illustrator, sort of you know, artist sort of take on things. And you do have to understand a lot about business, about because you're going to be a freelancer, for instance. You know, you're not going to work at a studio. No one's going to give you a job. No one's going to employ you regularly. You have to understand, again, like getting to the point where you're going to get a lot of books, and you're going to get the practice, and you're going to get the time and the money to actually do it. You know, it is a big challenge, right? It'll take you years and years and years to get to the point where you're going to be able to earn a full-time income. And you need to understand how to run a business, how to run a freelance business. You know, whether you want to get an agent later on is irrelevant, right? You need to get to a point where you can get work before you do that. So there's a whole bunch of challenges that come with that, right? And it is its own thing. And again, I think CDW doesn't really teach that as much as it teaches kind of entertainment industry, you know, sort of career paths, right? So again, just understand, like, you know, I think that's totally, this is more sort of what I do, really. Again, I'm a full-time freelancer. I work for a whole bunch of different sort of people. I have more sort of refined style, but because I can do all those stupid cube things, if someone says, hey, do you want to work on this game and draw spaceships? I'm like, cool, that sounds fun. I'll do that. You know, and that's like regular work.
We've
Do you know what I mean? There's more opportunities.
we've come a long way from drawing Ferraris. I don't know how we got down here.
Yeah. How did we go down here? Looking at Mambo
Anyway,
art.
how about you do some?
But yeah, the whole point is
do
like
some feedback.
no one knows or cares about Mambo art at all. But once it was like, you know, the bee's knees, and that's like if you really succeed at that. So again, just understand, if you want to do that, that's fine. But a lot of the other stuff we're seeing career-wise doesn't apply to that so much in terms of like how valuable this stuff is. What's valuable is like your ability to promote yourself like crazy, your ability to run an effective business, to negotiate contracts, to deal with publishing companies, to deal with art directors, right, one-on-one. It's like, if you don't have that, again, you still might be able to do it, but it'd be very challenging to make a living at it, right? Yeah, so again, all those things are possible. Now, where did I had this, yeah. So yeah, I was sort of going through these sort of earlier, doing a few notes. Again, I think the thing I was sort of saying about, yeah, Marissa's, because that's actually where I was sort of starting, is like, I think these wheels are looking really cool. I think that, again, probably some of the reason the wheels are looking a little bit off is maybe just that sort of distance is like a little bit off. I'm not 100% sure, right? Again, you sort of transformed this there, and that's sort of giving you some of that, right? But again, where are these things? That would be good to kind of figure out. But yeah, I mean, I think it's looking pretty cool. I think the trick is, like, as I was saying, is, you know, look where all these perspective lines are. Let's just make sure that things we draw, right, are kind of relating to all those perspective lines, right? And again, you know, if you're drawing, you know, steering wheels and things, let's make them, you know, make them go along some sort of axis, right? So we've sort of got these lines here, right? These lines here, these lines here. Let's just make sure that, right, that again, we're drawing through, putting those things, right, as if they're going to the, right, going to the same vanishing points, right? We need our mirrors. We just need all that stuff to line up. You've got the lines there. It's just a matter of practicing, like putting them into practice, right? Yeah, cool. But again, you're totally free to, you know, play around with that however you want. Marissa, as I said, I feel like we talked about it sort of to death, and you're probably regretting like asking us about it, which I do apologize for, because again, I think you made a huge improvement over this. Again, the wheels are looking great. You're totally getting the ellipses right. Yeah, but there's just a lot of stuff here where, you know, I feel like just if we sort of paid attention to where those lines were, I think you'd be able to kind of really, you know, just figure out where some of those details go a little bit more. But yeah, tons of really good stuff happening here. Yeah, you know, just keep going with it, and see how you go. Cool. With this one, Louise, I was sort of saying this back sort of ellipses seem a little bit off to me, but overall, I think this is looking pretty good. Again, that one looked sort of good, right? These ones are sort of looking pretty good. Yeah, so I'd say you sort of keep going with that. Again, that looks like a successful block in. Here again, Simon talked a lot about this one. Just got some notes here. That's a bit small, right? I feel like we could just make sure, again, we're not winging too many of these details, right? Find the structure, right? Again, the distance from, like, again, you can sort of tell that the distance this way is a little bit off, because like this sort of a like roll bar here just seems like it's a little bit sort of wide, right? It seems like it's a bit more like that, right? Whereas I think it needs to feel a bit more like that, right? Right, this one feels like it's a bit more like this, if that makes sense. Yeah, and just find the structure back here, right? I feel like we're doing it okay, but let's draw through, right? Much as we can. But yeah, cool details. Lots of stuff's looking good there. But again, let's see if we can clean it up, draw through, get all that stuff working properly. Here we had Denzel's. And yeah, I was just sort of saying, like, let's clean this up a little bit. Again, you know, make sure we've got the structure. We're thinking about, you know, how this is sort of wrapping around, right? And just making sure, again, the distance is here, right? Just the gap here feels consistent. I think I was sort of saying, again, this far side ellipse seems a little bit small, right? If we kind of carry this one across, right? Yeah, it just feels like, again, that one could be a little bit bigger. And again, here, I feel like, again, we just need to sort of find center, right? And actually sort of draw this stuff around. Think about the tree, right? Let's try and make sure, again, that we just maintain that sort of structure to everything. Because again, that way, when you come to render it, you have a much better time. Again, as Simon said, I feel like grid's a bit exaggerated, but again, that's not something to sort of worry about too much here. This is George's. And again, I think overall this is looking really cool. Again, the technical stuff is sort of working pretty well. Again, keep in mind, we sort of there is dimensionality to the rim sort of bits here, right? So find that dimension. So you can kind of actually sort of draw the rim. That one does go back more, But again, I totally. If people want to do what you're doing, just sort of copy paste it. I think that's
Do you want
that's totally
to?
fine.
One thing I was gonna say, Tim, is like, do you want to explain the rims a little bit? Like, I feel like a lot of people are drawing them on a parallel ellipse rather than like the rims actually like poke out. So the
Actually being in.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the, see if I can find the reference and bring that up.
I'm sorry to do this to everyone because you'll be like, oh my God.
Why am I? Yeah. But the basic idea is, again, the rims look more like, you can see the back one. Right. So again, if you were to view this from the side, right, and we've got our sort of tire, right? So you imagine again, we're looking at the X-ray version of that, right? So again, this sort of tucks in, right, and then we've sort of got this rim, right? It's a little bit sort of like this, right, and then it's kind of like. Again, this is just sort of diagrammatic. I'm not going to get the proportions 100% right here, right? It's sort of going, right, sort of stepping down, right? And then it goes in a little bit more, right? And then it steps in, right? Like there. We've got that, right? Probably a lot bigger than that, proportionally, right? But it's sort of stepping in. And might be like that. And so this is kind of what you've sort of got, right? So your rim, if anyone's sort of seen what these, like what a rim would sort of look like, right? And then your tire, right? Kind of the tire sort of clips into the rim. Sense. Again, just because structure can sometimes make these things a little bit easier to understand. So this stuff here, right? These things are like all the way in there, right? The actual kind of spokes of, right? So again, there'd be like sort of a central kind of hub there, right? And then the spokes are kind of basically coming out sort of here. So again, hopefully that's sort of clear as to what's kind of happening. So the thing to understand is like not all rims, right, are sort of symmetrical, right? So what you're seeing on the back one, right, is that sort of, and again, like the rim here, right, is sort of attached to the axle of the car. Right, on the inside, so in there, it's sort of connecting to something. So here, the back one, what's actually happening is that the axle is kind of connecting sort of like over here, right? But the rim is not symmetrical, right? They don't have to be symmetrical, right? So on that back one, right, it's probably stepping down, right? So it's going dunk. Dunk, dunk, right? And then it's sort of going like this. All right, so that's all hollow. And the tire is kind of like this, right? So it's probably dunk, dunk. And again, what's happening with the back one, right, is again, the spokes, like you sort of got the hub sort of there, and the spokes are actually kind of coming out like that. That makes sense? Here they're kind of coming out a bit like this, right? But here they're actually coming out, right? So it's actually connected here, right? And then this whole thing is, right, it's kind of hollow in here. So what that means is that for these back ones, right, if we sort of draw that back. Right. The actual kind of spoke, right, is kind of, the hub is probably sort of sitting back. Right, again, sort of back here, there would be an axle sort of going there. Again, make sure that, again, here we've got the engine. Make sure that, again, that sort of stops there, because just for future reference. Right. So yeah, so we're sort of seeing like these kind of spokes, but it's going to start way in there. And again, then you sort of look at, which I probably forget exactly how to get the division. But what we're sort of looking at doing is kind of getting this ellipse here, right? We've sort of got this ellipse here, and then we're going to sort of divide up this one into, let's say if we did it by 4, right? What you would kind of do is kind of say, all right, I've kind of got this ellipse here, right? And it's sort of connecting, right? Sort of connecting in there. All right, so it's probably going to connect. Yeah, so it might sort of connect somewhere there. Right, so we're finding, basically you've got an ellipse like this. Find out the clearest way to draw that. Right, and we're kind of right, we're sort of connecting up. Again, this is just super rough. Now this one, right, is sort of connecting up there, so you're not going to see it. This one, right, you're connecting up there, you're not going to see it. Right. That's kind of what we're.
Does that all making sense, guys? Because I feel like lots of people have drawn it like they've just done a small ellipse, and then they've done another one that just literally sits around that one, and then they're connecting the sprockets, and they're flat, whereas they actually go out. Yep. And like Hamish said, he's posted up a little sneaky way to do that from the Scott Robertson book in the Discord, so you can have a look at that as well. But
yeah. If you think about it as if you're drawing like a cup, right? Yeah, you're sort of, right, you sort of got, again, your sort of geometry, right? And it's almost like we're just sort of connecting dots. Right, so we've sort of got, again, that's probably not the best way to draw it because it's sort of front on. Right, and then we're kind of just saying, well, yeah, let's get rid of that. Right, do it again. Right, so again, constructing like a cup-like sort of structure, i.e. cup is just, we got little ellipse and big ellipse and we join them together. And then just going to run sort of along, again, a similar sort of axis, right? Find those, right? Find those sort of points. Again, this is still super rough, right? And then we're kind of just, right, connecting dots. Okay, I've got a dot here, dot there. Right, we just connect dots on there. Right, and again, then it's just a matter of sort of, the more of this sort of structure, right, you add, and I'll clean this up so you can kind of see what's sort of going on. All right, but this is what a lot of this stuff is about. It's just like really simple. Just dividing stuff up, doing sort of points and stuff.
And that's why, yeah, you just need to find like finding the box around things, you know, the ellipses around things. You just, yeah, all of that stuff's super important. Then you get construction, and then you can just like, once you've got that, then it's just connecting the dots, and that bit's kind of a bit easier, right? But yeah, the first tricky bit is sort of finding those basic shapes that you need to kind of construct everything from.
Yep. So again, that's just sort of rough, right? Sort of sketch of what's, you know, the sort of thing that's sort of happening, right? And again, it's just that, again, this sort of around here is like actual sort of rim, right? Yeah, so again, like that's kind of, those are the sort of structures we're trying to build. Again, you know, like you can have as much, you know, you can play around with that as much as you want. You know, not everyone is going to be able to sort of get to the point where they're ready to put in that detail. You might be struggling with other things. Again, you know, if you sort of struggle with it, maybe just, you know, forget about the spokes, but let's just try and get this like sort of right, this kind of like basic thing happening, right? Where we got the rim, and that way, right, we can shade these things as being different, right? Have like shadow, light, etc., and get that sort of sorted. Yeah, so again, you know, that's, were you going to say something?
No, all good.
Cool. Yeah, so again, those things can be sort of tricky, you know, but again, it's one of these things where, like, if you just step through it, like, I was often a bit surprised, you know, how, like, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be, I don't want to do that. And then you kind of just do it, and you're like, yeah, it's just kind of connect the dots. And after a while, I think if you're at the point where you have the breathing room to kind of do that, I think you find like, it'll make your car look a million times better. And really, again, once you sort of just can separate it out into 5 and you find those points, and then you can kind of, you know, like get it sort of happening. So again, like, I think you've done like a decent sort of job here, George. But yeah, it's probably just sort of stepping like where those things connect like back a little bit. And then on this one, when you copy it, when you do the copy paste, you copy paste this, but then just maybe have that on a separate layer. Just move it back that way, right? And then just see where those things connect, and then connect them up, right? So you still do the copy paste stuff, right? You just got to know where it sort of fits, if that makes sense. And again, like the trick is, like, you can try to copy paste, and sometimes it'll work, you know what I mean? And sometimes it won't. And if it doesn't work, you're like, okay, I got to draw that. You know, sometimes, yeah, you just copy paste some nuts and bolts and they look great. Other times it's like, you know, yeah, that looks terrible. Cool. So Liam, I basically think that this one is sort of looking good for where you're at. You know, again, just sort of, you know, make sure you double check all that stuff and all those things we've sort of been talking about as you go. But, you know, I'm just looking at these ellipses, and most of that sort of stuff looks pretty good. I feel like here, again, we're like pretty close, right? But I do feel like this one is maybe up a tiny bit, but again, none of that's really going to make a big difference. Cool. William, again, I was looking at this one. I think this is looking pretty cool. This is looking very sort of solid. So again, just keep going, move along, and see if you can, again, add those sort of details and get that sort of stuff working. Lewis, I think proportion looks better. Still, I feel like we need to sort of check these ellipses, right? These seem like a little bit sort of distorted, right? My sort of, all right. The quadrants seem a little bit sort of different, right? In sort of shape, right? Yeah, so just like sort of check that stuff. But yeah, I think this is sort of looking cool. And again, I don't have a problem with level of sort of stylization you sort of got going. But again, like this ellipse just seems like, right, the minor axis is kind of not, again, not at 90 degrees. Right, we need it to be, right, sort of going that way. So again, roughly that way is going to be okay, right? But this one is looking a bit wrong. Again, just keep in mind here, it feels like these ellipses don't feel like they're going along that same sort of minor axis. So yeah, again, I put a few notes there to sort of help you. Again, it's looking a lot better. I think proportion looks good. Still a few of those things. The reason we keep going on about those ellipses and things is it's just one of those situations where, like, if you really just get integrated, and I'm sure it's something you're just learning at the moment, but once you really understand that, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're drawing, you know, super stylized or whatever, just following those rules makes drawing heaps of stuff like a million times easier. Cool. So again, I feel like we talked about this one, and yeah, it's just a matter of sort of, you know, picking which sort of angle to choose. But again, let us know how you progress with that. I think it's mostly up to you to sort of keep sketching and seeing whether you can find an angle that sort of works for you. But yeah, just pick that sort of basic sort of, you know, 3/4 sort of view, something like that is gonna work the best. This one seems like it's a bit squished. Cool. So this one. Again, I feel like that's looking pretty good. You can see here there's trouble in Paradise with these ellipses because just I'm sort of, you know, can sort of see like that's where that's going, right? But this ellipse is sort of not there, right? And again, we can sort of see that that's sort of happening here, right? And basically like, right, so there's just like a loop, they're sort of lining up here, right? But then again, this one is being a little bit smaller than this one. So yeah, just double check all of that stuff, right? There's sort of roughly center. The other thing I'm kind of noticing, right, is if we sort of draw that center line down, right? So there's a few of those things, right, where I feel like we're just maybe like skipping a few of those. I can see you sort of got the structure, but in many ways kind of, you know, like, and again, that's tricky because you could be sort of drawing this on the ground plane, right? And I think that's maybe where you're sort of running into trouble, right? Like, I think sort of you've placed this here, and that looks like maybe we've sort of placed it by sort of maybe copying the sort of top view or whatever. However you're doing it, right? Understand, like, I need to find the center here. Okay, that is the center. That's cool. But remember this thing, right? The actual body of the car is not on the ground. It's above the ground, right? So again, if that's where the center is, you need to, right, sort of move it up. Find the center on the ground plane. You really need to put it in. Make sure all of this stuff is sort of measured. And I feel like it's just, we sort of put this on the ground. Maybe that's sort of what's going on there. If we check these, that one looks, that sort of stuff is looking better. And I just sort of say use smaller lines. That will help you there.
And I want to
Cool.
also just, Tim, just so you sort of know. Like, I want to say, Michael, like, I mean, from your week one stuff to this, it's like improved, I don't know, like 5,000%. So like what you're doing is like really cool, Michael. It's like really coming along. Just keep going with it. Just keep working and it'll keep getting better. Just keep applying all these notes and trying to work it out as best as you can.
Yep. Find some structure there if you can. And again, like I don't have, because I don't have you guys for many of the other classes anymore. I used to do sort of character design and other stuff, but I don't have time for that just at the moment. So yeah, I really have no idea. And it can be hard for me to keep track of people. So yeah, Simon has a much better idea of kind of like how people are progressing, whereas I'm always just being like, this is wrong. But yeah, so I'm probably missing out on some of that sort of progression stuff. That's obviously kind of happening. Murray, yeah, I think this is looking cool. I think Simon sort of talked about this one a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good to me. Again, let's make sure, again, we figure out where those, right, like what's happening here, right, and see if we can, if there is some sort of structure there that you can sort of build. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's looking pretty good. Yeah, cool. I mean, again, I think Simon sort of talked through that a little bit and some of the things he was seeing in terms of the perspective, maybe some stuff being just a little bit, I think you were sort of saying some of it feels like it's just a bit sort of being won, right?
So Murray's
which,
here.
Again,
he was nodding his head.
Yeah. It's kind of like, yeah. And I think, again, I feel like probably just your ability to, get some of that stuff sort of naturally is probably pretty good. Let's watch these ones though. Remember, these are still ellipses, so they go around the minor axis. Right, and again, that's where so many of these things will come in handy, right? But again, like some of these I feel like that's looking pretty good. I think that'll give you a good indication of how to do that. So yeah, keep going, keep at it, see how this sort of progresses. Yeah, cool. This one was sort of Aaron. So again, I'd say it's probably like similar sort of thing to what we're sort of talking about. Right, so basically like these right don't seem to match. All right, the overall sort of drawing. And again, just like let's if I just sort of go through, right, like if I use that line but I try and sort of make it match the wheels, right, that's not right. Like this wheel and this wheel are sort of not on the same line. So I think it's just a matter of like figuring out, right, like how are you actually drawing this, right? I feel like, again, you can take this to finish and see how far you get and like see what happens. But yeah, I feel like we need more structure, right? So I think it's just a matter of like the more of that you can do, the more solid it's going to be. And again, the trick here is like, if you drew it in a nice sort of, like Quentin Blake style, like wobbly sort of line, you had some sort of, sort of like wheels on your car that were all a bit sort of wobbly. It's kind of like, yeah, no one's going to really notice or sort of care, right? But again, when we're trying to sort of make it all tight, what you'll find is like the tighter you make it, the more it sort of shows where maybe there's a few of those mistakes. So yeah, again, let us know sort of how you want to progress. I'd say,
Yeah, and I think Aaron, like, really go through like the stuff that I was shown before, you know, like that kind of cone of vision, get your perspective grid working, get your car where you want it on the perspective grid where it's going to work, all of those sorts of things. Like, it just feels like that's some of the stuff that's missing from this, right? And then you can work on your ellipses, you can work on blocking it out, putting it in, you know, getting it on the grid, and refining it from there. It will make all the things Tim is showing you now, it will make all of those things easier.
yeah. But things I noticed, like just to sort of go sort of through it in general, is like this ellipse seems bigger than this ellipse, right? Like just sort of the size of it, right? The size of this ellipse versus that, whereas it should be smaller. Why? Because it's going away from us, right? You know, like this one, it feels like, again, it's sort of big here and big here, small here and small here, and probably, again, you're going to want it, again, to be more equal, right? And it's like sort of up like here and here, and it's going to be sort of bigger here than it is there, if anything. Yeah, so again, just drawing all those center lines. I feel like some of it's just sort of winging it a little bit, again, where that's kind of put in. Just doesn't feel like that, right? Doesn't feel like that's sort of an equal sort of circle within a circle. So just things like that, right? You know, just doesn't feel like these are all sort of on the same sort of axis, right? Just like this ellipse inside that ellipse. And so that's where, again, it's just a matter of sort of, you know, focusing on that, trying to draw through. If you just try and guess it, right, you sort of run into trouble. So yeah, I did want to sort of talk a little bit about this one. Again, you know, we can sort of see here, Cheska, that, right, if we kind of draw through our sort of centers there, you've done a really good job of drawing a lot of that sort of detail in. But again, like we're just looking for basic sort of, you know, minor axis, major axis sort of stuff. Again, if we sort of look at our sort of rough 90-degree indication, it just feels like, you know, our sort of 1, 2, right? Those things aren't quite matching, right? Right, and again, that stuff is just, you know, it's just a matter of at the initial kind of bit, all right? Like just trying to focus and make sure that all goes down properly. Right. So again, it's not that bad, right? It's like looking pretty good. But again, like sort of, I think a lot of it is sort of where this one is placed relative to this one. Right? If we sort of look at, you know, just sort of roughly where these lines, right, are sort of meant to go, right? It just feels like sort of this ellipse right here, right, is a little bit too down. That's like the worst feedback ever. It's too this way. Sorry. But you can sort of see, again, like we should sort of be going in, right? If I sort of look at where all the other sort of lines that indicate that to me, right? Again, like this one, you know, should have all of these lining up, right? And there should be, again, lines there, whereas this is kind of splotching out a bit here. Right, again, this one looks a little bit better, but yeah, so just keep in mind those things. I think you've done a really good job on the rendering, and that stuff is kind of working out well. Again, you can sort of get rid of some of these lines if it's sort of affecting your ability to sort of render it, but I think you're doing a really good job, right? So, you know, sort of keep going. I would say, like, play with that. Right. Again, I feel like, that there is value in sort of rendering it up and, get all of this stuff rendered. You will learn a lot about, again, what you need to do and what will kind of show up, what won't show up. And again, there might be, right, a bit of extra sort of stuff here, right, that you might want to put in that will kind of make it feel bigger. And remember, there's not red stuff there, right? Because that's where the axle sort of goes in there. Yeah, keep that stuff in mind, but yeah, looking pretty cool. Yeah, awesome. All right, so I think there's a few more here. We'll just quickly go over them if we got like a few more sort of minutes. So again, I feel like this is sort of looking good, but let's just watch let's just watch that kind of height. But yeah, I mean, I think this sort of thing you're doing here is sort of working well. But yeah, let's just watch that side profile as well. Yeah, so keep going. Just that's the main thing I noticed, and make sure we're not doing that anywhere else as well. Like really kind of not understanding the height profile or anything like that. Yeah, cool. And this one. So again, I think this is looking a little bit better. Wheels are a bit small. So again, I feel like this ellipse is kind of like looks good. But again, if we sort of draw right with some of those other sort of perspective lines. Right, this one seems like it's a lot smaller, right? So we're sort of making that like really taper, whereas it should be a little bit more sort of like that. If that makes sense. Again, not sure exactly how it would sort of go. And this one, again, if we sort of take a line through there, this one just sort of right. Again, we sort of got like a sort of a shape like that, right? And we should have, right, a shape that's like a little bit more like this. And again, watch where that is, right, in relation to sort of height. And I feel like we might be sort of dealing with something that's maybe a bit more like that. Yeah, I won't put that in because that would just be confusing. But yeah, just check that. Again, we're sort of going over here, seeing sort of similar things. Got that wheel there, right? And we've sort of got the gap there. So just make sure you're sort of doing, yeah, and there's often like very good reasons for why this is happening. It's just a matter of reestablishing, like stepping back, refocusing, like, okay, where are these lines? What's happening? Can I wing this? Can I not wing that? Where are things? Yeah, when you're trying to find lines back here, it can just be like, oh man, that's too hard. If I just put something in, it'll kind of look okay. And often if you've got nothing there and you put something in there, you're like, wow, it looks heaps better, but it's just that sort of, it's not quite right. Yeah, cool. So this is, again, Ella's. And I think, as I said, I feel like this one is looking sort of pretty pretty sort of good. I feel like that, just sort of going off the lines that I sort of see here, right, which sort of seem to sort of be fairly consistent. I think you're doing a really good job. This is all looking awesome, right? Let's just kind of watch. I just see that side mirror, and I'm like, something about that is kind of like a little bit, right? Just where that's lining up. Let's think about, right, there is like a steering sort of thing in here, right? If you look at that model, and what you can sort of imagine, this is where the structure can help you. This is looking awesome. Let's deal with this poor little steering wheel. I feel like it's a little bit misshapen. So think about, again, there's going to be a steering column coming up here in some way, right? It's going to come at some way. It might be like that. It might be like that, right? But it's sort of going to be somewhere like that. And again, just remember, right? We can draw an ellipse around that. That's a really good way to kind of get a feel, right? I feel like just sort of sorting that out. Again, it might not be that high. I'm just trying to sort of think about how we can sort of consider that and get that sort of steering column to kind of feel, right? Feel like it's sort of fitting there. But yeah, these are all sort of looking really cool. Again, keep in mind, often, again, we're going to see this sort of structure here as well, potentially, right? And that where you can kind of put shadow, right? Highlight or whatever, you can sort of separate, again, the sides there. Looks like, again, you've got some of those lines there. I'm not sure 100% what they all sort of mean, but yeah, keep in mind, right, there is some of this sort of structure that we can sort of put in there. And I know it seems like that's like a million stupid lines, but when you're trying to render it, you're going to be like, where does that go? And I'm like, oh, that's right. That stupid line would have told me where that goes. And again, as I was saying here, right, just keep in mind, that we should consider, these ellipses to be the same as the wheels, right? That's going to sort of function the same way. I know how I haven't done a great job of kind of placing it properly, but again, it might come out a little bit more like that. And again, you can draw these in, draw one, right? But again, they're all going to basically go through the same thing, right? So again, got a little, right? Little one there, right? Little one there, we draw through, right? Sort of join it up, etc. So again, I know that seems like the most anal retentive, unfair thing to say, because you've sort of done a really good job here. But again, for everyone, if you guys just get used to being like, oh, I got to draw, a whole bunch of cylinders, right? So I'll just put a whole bunch of those lines in there. Then you kind of just like rotate it to where it is, and you just like bang, bang, bang. It's done, right? You don't even think about it. It's just a matter of getting used to doing those things. Yeah. Cool. So this one was sort of Daniela's. I feel like we sort of talked about this. Yeah, I feel like this, right? This one back here. Like we need to kind of figure out, right? Need to figure out some of this sort of proportion. I think you're going to find that this sort of wheel here is going to be at much more of an angle, right? Then we've sort of got it. Yeah, well, I think it's, you know that it should sort of be like, we should see less of it at the back, right? So it should be, right, if this one's like this, right, then the one at the back should be more like that. So we sort of know that it's kind of true. Again, if we sort of trace that sort of across, that's sort of looking pretty good, right? But I think the main thing is just, yeah, I think, excuse me, we need to find that on the ground plane a little bit more, right? Like, what is the proportion, you've sort of done it a little bit, but I think it seems like you're sort of doing a bit and then we're sort of winging it. So other things here, again, just remember, right, here you've got, you know, this line that's kind of running sort of somewhat through there. Okay, this ellipse is on that thing, right? And, you know, the ellipse back here is going to be on that same minor axis, right? So all these ellipses are going to be on the same So yeah, just sort of getting that happening. Here, okay, I like that you've got the center there. That's sort of awesome, right? I think it's like, so awesome that you sort of got it, but let's see if we can sort of find where that is on the ground plane. That would kind of help us. And again, as Simon was sort of saying, let's try and sort of just sort of think about, again, like people are like, oh, I can kind of wing it. And I'm like, yep, you can, right? You can sort of wing it, but you know, you need to think about, right? Like how good are you at winging it? And can you kind of do it? And you sort of do it well enough, right? So things that I would know is I'm imagining, right? I'm envisioning that there is this sort of line around here. So if I'm to wing it, the first thing I'm going to try and do is have a crack at drawing this and make it feel as if it's symmetrical across there. The second thing, right, I'm going to understand is this is going to sort of taper in here, right? And at some point it's going to hit here. And as soon as it kind of hits there, right, it's going to basically run parallel, okay, under here. So this is me winging it. Right, it's going to run parallel so that, because you know there's a little lip there, and it's going to be the same distance right here until it kind of comes out here, and then it's going to sort of join over there. So it's understanding that distance, right, that will really kind of help you. So yeah, keep in mind when you're trying to do those things. Again, this probably is still wrong, but yeah, we just need to maintain that, and we're sort of imagining, right, that there's this thing there, right? I think inside there is like a little mesh or something. So again, just check those things right here. We've got this. Just figure out like where does that go? Like where does that insert in here, etc., etc. Again, I feel like maybe again we need to find that, right? And we need to find where that goes. Excuse me. Let's draw through. So I feel like this bit could be wider, and that's where again you got to find that center on the ground plane, right? And think about, well, like, okay, I've got my center on the ground plane, right? Bang, it's somewhere here. Okay, how wide is this relative to this, you know? And it's like, well, that's where we look at the top plane, right? Again, so that's the, right? And that's where you kind of be like, well, how wide is it? You know, how you know, and where do these come from? Etc., etc.
Poor Daniela. I feel like every week he gets smashed with stuff to do. Hey, just... what's that? No, you're not taking one with the team. You just I would also go back to the like your just your blocks of where you blocked that in. Can you just go back to that, Tim? Just
this?
Just up, like top left, like that the construction bit.
Oh, here.
Yeah, I know it's like really faded out, but just this bit here is a bit whackety whack, Daniela. So like having it, the Ferrari doesn't go out that far at the front from the wheels, So you've actually measured yours as like 7 cubes long, your Ferrari. I don't know if you noticed that.
I was having issues like you said last week, trying to draw it on the ground, like the cubes. I don't think I did the cubes well.
Yep.
Mm.
I was a bit scared that they were a bit small at first.
Yeah. Well, just remember, like, yeah, I think when you block it in as like 5 cubes long, it does look a bit kind of short. But then remember, there's a bit at the back that kind of sticks out that makes it like 5 cubes and like sort of 3/4 or whatever.
Yeah.
And that bit normally like helps the proportion quite a bit. But just remember, like
Also, it's quite flat.
yeah, yeah,
The
and
cube makes it feel a bit different, whereas when it's kind of like, yeah, when you sort of overall proportions can be deceptive, right?
yeah. So like, just remember if you do the cube, you know, as good as you can, right? The cube is the cube. It won't be wrong. Just like trust that it'll be okay. And then yeah, I think like when you, like Tim's saying, when you put the car in it, it kind of looks smaller and skinnier, if that makes sense. Like, so when you do it with just the cubes,
Yeah.
it does look a bit kind of like, you know, not quite right, but it'll kind of hold together. Yeah. So just watch those proportions, because I just noticed that in the forum I was like, oh, hang on a minute, you got too many cubes, like too long.
Yeah.
So no matter how you try and fix it in this drawing, it's gonna like always look a bit like elongated.
It'll always look a bit long.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
so I would try and fix that, like I'd do that bit, and just I know, and the bits you're doing, like the nose cone and stuff, is now like looking quite solid, like how the construction runs over it, and then you got little panels either side, like it's looking really good. So like it's, yeah, you're getting bits that are working, and now it's just all those other bits. So yeah, just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, keep going. And that's why, again, a big part of what I sort of recommend is like, okay, so you do your block in, you know, and then like quickly, again, spend your kind of like few minutes just sort of roughly being like, oh, okay, you know, if I make these into wheels,
Yeah, just do that on a separate
Right,
layer or whatever.
you know,
It
and
doesn't
I-
have to be
well, yeah, separate layer, and I'm like, does this look right or wrong, right? You know, like you just sort of sketch it, you know, because yeah, if you draw that out, you're like, oh yeah, that looks pretty long, you know. And also, again, there's a few sort of situations where I think we sort of had like again, we were sort of looking at this one, and again, you know, I think before it was sort of too skinny, right? And now it's kind of like a bit sort of fat. Again, I feel like you can solve a lot of those problems by, again, often it's a matter of like, we've got the right proportion one way, and we just kind of like not really checking, right? Like how big that actual body is, right? So you got the cubes, but the question is like, well, yeah, but how much, if you carve off the cube, right, how much is left? And that's
Yeah,
where,
the
again,
width.
just doing a little sort of sketch and being like, okay, let's make these wheels, right? Let's like put this in there. And then you've got a feeling for like, what you're sort of aiming for. You sort of know like, okay, so I'm trying to find these like little sort of circles and things, and they're kind of like going to be this big. They're not going to be that big. It just gives you an understanding of like how those blocky proportions translate into like, you know, the real car, right? Sort of it bridges that gap. And the more you can kind of keep doing that, the easier it will be over time to kind of, again, as you're blocking in, to understand how that proportion is going to carry over, right? Because again, that is a skill, right? A big part of the skill you're trying to build is this, that, you know, I think a lot of people are like, well, you kind of can't teach that because it's just like sort of drawing sense. And it's like, but that's what we're building, is just, yeah, when you're blocking out that proportion, right? This is really all we're doing, is just so that next time when you're sitting there sketching, you're like, oh, I'm going to draw a car. It's like this big, right? By this big, by, right? That's good, right? That's all. It's just like, oh, so I'm going to get a center line here, and I got these wheels here, right? And I'm sort of drawing this thing, right? Oh, that's a bit, yeah, right, yeah, that looks better, right? That's all you're doing. But this skill is trick skill unto itself that you're building, to just be like, okay, I'm sort of just in stuff, but how does that relate to my finished drawing, right? How does that sort of affect things, you know? And again, that's where it's just sort of a sense that you're sort of building for how proportion will look, you know, like how is some sort of design going to look, right? Once you kind of add all those things. So again, just understand that that's worth building. It's you know, takes time. Anyway, we're way over, so we should hang up our tools for today, or at least I will. You guys can pick them up and keep doing this, and we'll see you next week for the. We've got a few more shiny Ferraris, and we can sort of talk about this and give you a few little bits of feedback before your final presentation.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Am I still here, or was I dropping off?
You're sort of dropping in and out, but yeah, we managed through.
Cool.
It's all good.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Okay. It's time.
Goodbye. Close it down. Also, just for you guys that are here, like another trick you can do, like if you want to check your ellipses and things, also try like flipping the canvas horizontally. That's something you can do. Flip it upside down, all right? Because even if you flip it upside down, so if I do this, your ellipses, your ellipses should still look good, right? Yeah, so sometimes that's a good thing. Like you can even, you know what like old school artists used to do? They used to get a mirror and like look at it in the mirror. So you could like, yeah, get a mirror. If like, because sometimes you just need to detach your brain from it. You're like, I don't know what's wrong anymore. So that's a good thing. Like flipping it around, flipping it upside down, that can all help just give you like a fresh view, especially on your ellipses and how they're looking. Sorry?
I'm gonna flip the table. I didn't think of flipping a canvas for Ferrari.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you do the same thing, right? Because you straight away you'll be like, oh, those things look shit. Because I always do that, right? Like you flip it and you're like, hate my life. Then you flip it back. Yeah, so but that will help with those things too. And if you measure it out and they're all looking good, when you flip it, it should look good as well, right? So yeah. Anyway, let's get out of here.
Updated and everything every side and everything. It's just like overworking it. I even like moved like copy and pasted the files into the actual like directory of like the program. Like actually everything was not. I don't know.
It took me literally half a day to work out how to install it. I set up and I was so excited. I was like, oh, there's $30.
Yeah.
It was like $30
It's like $30 US, but just to start what 40 my least priority at the moment. Like, I'm trying to work it out for ages. Like, how to,
Yeah, it's so annoying.
yeah.
Hey, you moron. The girl boss said.
I'm gonna have to buy it sooner or later, so like.
So much more issues. Like, my friend didn't get her statement certified, like when you updated. So I don't know what to do. I'll think of that